what exactly is crackhead work ethic?
So,
did you see the Black Lives Matter donation/lawsuit?
Who's oppressing you? You have $10 million, man. When you call everything that's a slight against you, when you try and put a racial spin on it, actual racism is that gets to slip in because you don't even recognize it anymore.
You said something to the effect of there's somebody out there with half your IQ who's accomplishing 10x what you are because they're not smart enough to doubt themselves.
I choose to make humor out of my life. And in that humor, one of the things that's just funny to me, man, are crackheads. I think they're like vampires, man.
All right, guys, bang, bang. Very excited about this. I thought the first place we could start is crackhead work ethic. And I'm going to tell you a story before you explain why you talk about this so much. But I have a brother. I got 4 brothers, but one of them used to joke all the time and say, crackhead wakes up and they're going to eat today. Don't let them outwork you. And I came across one of your tweets like 2, 3, 4 years ago, whenever it was. And I was like, holy shit, man, you know my brother? And I've seen you talking about this, and then I've seen you talk about it over and over and over again. So what exactly is crackhead work ethic?
So, people wonder where like that comes from or why I talk about that so much. And you gotta like understand where I grew up. Like I'm a project of public housing. And if you don't know anything about public housing, there's the at-risk youth, urban elements, gang violence, a lot of drugs, that kind of thing, right? So crackheads are like, this is just part of growing up, man. We used to get babysat by a crackhead. Like I've seen people smoking the shit and doing other drugs. And I remember one time as a youngster, I didn't understand why my mom was arguing with the woman that babysat us, because I was like, oh, I just squirted some water on the couch. Why is this a big deal? I was like 3 or 4. Well, it turns out it was a syringe full of heroin. That's what it was. It wasn't water. I didn't know that. And my mom's like, why you have this around the kid? And the crackhead's like, why? Who's going to pay for this? It's all freaked out. So
that was the debate of who's going to pay for
it. Right. It was silly. Like I remember asking my mom about this probably a few years ago and just like reminiscing and all. And that was the issue. She was mad. The addict was mad because, that's drugs and who's going to pay for it. My mom was like, why is this stuff out to where a kid can even get to it or whatever? So you see this stuff and you have to cope with it. And I always say, you can laugh a little or cry a lot, right? So I choose to make humor out of my life. And in that humor, one of the things that's just funny to me, man, are crackheads. And I think they're like vampires, man. Like if you look at them, there's a joke like you can't kill them or you can't catch them, and they're super strong. I mean, the reality is like whether they're strong or fast or whatever, a lot of it is driven by the need to acquire this very addictive substance, and that's where that work ethic comes from. I mean, sure, we could bottle that without the need to get addicted to something. That'd be awesome. Right. But we can't. So instead I joke about it. And in those jokes, I'm imparting some wisdom, because look, if you ever seen someone get clean, a lot of times what happens is you don't just break an addiction. Mm-hmm. Instead, you replace it or dilute it with other things. And a lot of times, these guys will pick up something positive and will just run with it, because they're no longer they're getting their fix from something that has a positive externality, associated with it, as opposed to getting their fix, from an addictive, destructive substance. So that work ethic, that gets channeled into a lot of other things, and that's where the crackhead work ethic comes from.
I have this theory about people, and this I think aligns very well with it, which is there's high volatility and low volatility people. And I've talked a bunch of times on the show about as an investor, when you're investing in founders, you want high volatility people. Either they're going to build a multi-billion-dollar company, or it's going to be a big hole in the ground, but you want it to go big, right? Guys like Adam Newman, people are like, why does he keep getting money? Well, it's because he's going big. You just don't know which direction, right? But like it's going to be big. And so that's in investing. But in the regular world, outside of investing, there's high volatility and low volatility people. And what you're describing is basically high volatility people where there's an obsession, like almost personality trait where, yes, the drug, there's a chemical component to it where they get addicted to it and they become obsessive and all of this. But if they replace it with something else that then becomes an obsession, whether it's a drug or not, that's a high volatility person. They can swing drastically and then go like 100 miles an hour towards that thing. And it's almost like the person themselves, is they're pointing in the right direction, it's a positive. Pointing in the wrong direction could be catastrophic.
And yeah, and the two things come to mind when you say that, right? So first, I never described it as high volatility and low volatility. The phrasing I always use, but it's not in the context of an addictive personality, just kind of how you grew up and what you experienced as a youngster. I call it a ceiling, the ceiling on the floor concept, right? When you grow up in a safe environment, when you grow up nurtured without really wanting for anything. I'm not saying you're spoiled, just not destitute. Your mentality is to maintain that and to kind of meet the expectations of the status quo you grew up in. So your floor is higher. You're not. It's really hard for you to fall off. You got a support system around you. You more or less understand how to work and do things and be a constructive, productive, contributing member to whatever group you're part of. Your floor is higher. Mm-hmm. But your ceiling is lower. You're not going to take risks. You're not going to fly off and do something crazy because those moves are highly volatile. To start a business, right? You could succeed and be great. You could also fail and end up going on the welfare line. And if you've never been in that position, that is like devastating. We don't deal well with loss at all. So you're like, I'm going to avoid the loss, but in avoiding the loss, you avoid the gain, the potential gain as well, right? And then the other thing I thought about when you were saying that is, I know some people who did hard drugs and didn't get hooked. I know a guy that smoked crack like 2 or 3 times, and he was like, it's just not for me. Now, no one would look at that end of one experiment and go, told you it was a scam. Crack's not addictive. Like no one will react that way. But what that tells me, there are a lot of different ways to interpret that based on what we know now, and how your environment and who you are shapes whether you're going to get addicted to certain things or not. But one of the other interpretations is like, what if there are people who, for whatever reason, they don't take to things like that. And drugs just happen to be an easy example to look at and measure because we can measure the negative output, or not negative output, negative outcomes. Okay, well, you're in prison. We can ask you where you're in drugs. You committed a crime. We can see the drugs behind it. You get into the system in one way or the other, and we can see the effect of drugs. But what we don't see are the people who have that same trait, never pick up something negative, but never excel in something positive either. Mm-hmm. They're the people who it's like the balanced lifestyle folks, right? Mm-hmm. There's that whole thing like, you want a little balance, and balance is cool and balance is great and there's a lot of benefit to it. But one of the things you don't get typically when you have balance is you don't get exceptionality. You get, there are 2 ways to have a B average, right? Which is to be B's in all subjects, or to have like 2 A's and a bunch of D's, and it's still not going to quite work out, but you tend to not be exceptional in any 1 or 2 areas that it's going to gain you recognition or a disproportionately or asymmetrically higher income than if you do the right balance thing and you don't, right is, I don't like saying right, if you take the balanced, safe approach to life.
One of the beliefs I think that's changed a little bit in business is it used to be go find the well-rounded person. Go find the person who went to a certain school, got the degrees, got, this skill set. They were in this club. They did this extracurricular activity. They worked at this job for 5 years, whatever. Now I see a lot more people talking about hire for the exceptional skill. So exactly what you're talking about. Don't hire the B student across the board. Hire for the person who is amazing at sales and they're horrible at finance, right? Because guess what? When they join the team, they are not going to be running the finance team.
Right.
They're going to be running the sales team. And you need someone who's excellent at sales, and so go hire for that. But what it makes me think a lot about is like in your life, most people are actually aspiring to be the well-rounded person. And it always cracks me up. Like I'll talk to a friend, I'll be like, what have you been doing? And they'll tell me some like crazy hobby they picked up or something. Why are you doing that? Like it basically because I think I should. I'm like, do you enjoy doing it? They're like, no, it's hard. It sucks. I'm like, so are you doing it because it's hard and it sucks? Like, okay, I see that path of thinking. But usually is no, because I think that I should be doing this and it provides some social signal, or I want to fit into a certain group or whatever. And I'm just like, man, what a life that would suck to like live just doing shit because you think other people expect you to do it.
And what you're describing a lot of people, and probably even more than I tend to cluster, because to me, I see it as a normal distribution. I see a lot of traits, and even if that's not like exact, and it almost certainly isn't, it's useful, and we can make some useful predictions. If I tell you that, the average person is balanced, and most people fall within two standard deviations of that on either side, they're either going to be kind of good at many things and are kind of bad at many things. That leaves this rare individual that gets it. Whether they get it intentionally or accidentally stumbled into it and had some good experiences and some payback and kept with it, it doesn't matter. But they get it. The rewards are they're so disproportionately higher. They don't scale linearly. I wouldn't even say truly exponentially. If you are really good, that's like boxing, for example. If you're a good enough boxer to get into the top 10, you're going to make a lot more money than a club fighter, but not nearly as much money as the guy who is fighting for the title. Mm-hmm. By definition, 1 or 2. Okay. But to get to 1 or 2, you got to give up a lot. Mm-hmm. Even to get in the top 10, you got to give up a lot. I wrote an article about this when I was, people always ask me why did I stop with the record I had? And it's a complicated answer, or at least multifaceted answer, which is why I wrote the essay. But one of the things I touched on was that for me to get to the top 10 with my ability, where I started, my size, that's a huge opportunity cost. Is it worth it? Right now, I'm making a decision because I happen to have other skills that have a payoff, and I made the trade-off. I think it was an appropriate, smart one to focus on building my writing career, my website, and everything I do on the internet in place of that. But a lot of people don't have that trade-off. So you look at the fighters, or we'll just use fighters because that's the example, but I think it scales in any competitive domain, or domain where there is I guess zero sum is probably a better way to look at it. And the people who make it to the top are so much further ahead of everyone else in the middle. But to get there, you have to be obsessed. Like anyone you see playing professional sports on TV, those aren't well-rounded individuals. It's actually kind of a joke here in America that we make these guys go to college first, at least in the NFL. The NFL, I think, is the only sport where there's not a direct from high school to pro pipeline. I know there's one in basketball. I know there's one in baseball, and I'm pretty sure there's one in hockey, but not in the NFL. But it's a joke that we're like, you got to go through the NCAA and go to college because who are we kidding here? You're not making these guys. Very rarely where you get the guy that's like
Myron Roll, remember him?
Yeah, right.
Myron Roll was like a Rhodes Scholar. He was in like pre-med, and he was also a star on the football field.
I'm trying to remember the guy's name. He played for the Ravens. Johnny. I follow him on Twitter. I think we follow each other, but he's got his degree in math. Mm-hmm. I remember Courtney Brown, who played for the Browns. He was in engineering. He had an engineering major at Penn State. But these guys are like rare. I mean, like we
can name them because they're so rare.
I don't even follow. Right, exactly. We don't even follow football that much. At least I don't. I follow well enough to know that like when someone outstanding like that shows up, because that's not normal. What is normal is being so obsessed that you get to that level and you don't do anything else. I don't like no one cares if these guys can even really read. I mean, I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. I'm just pointing out that sometimes you got to give up. But if
you could read the defense, that might be more important to the NFL team.
Then read Love and Peace or War and Peace. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
All right.
Elon Musk, when he was on SNL, I think he said it best. He's like, I'm trying to get to Mars. Did you think I was going to be normal? Right. Like, no. And then I remember seeing all these articles a while ago. My father actually, he pointed out, I think it was like, there's an article written, it was like Jeff Bezos does the dishes at home and like drops the kids off at work. I was like, bullshit. Bullshit. Right. And I get that people want to present like a certain viewpoint, right? But it's like, it's also different between what it took to get to a certain point and then what you do once you're kind of at the peak, right? But it's hard work, right? And it goes back to kind of this like crackhead work ethic idea of like, if you want to be great at something, you have to fucking work hard.
If you want to be the greatest crack addict that's ever lit up a pipe in the hood, you're not getting a job. Look, I've met functional addicts. Like, nah, you're gonna be out there every day. You're hitting the scrapyard or something, right? Now, I don't want anyone to hear this and go, this motherfucker is promoting drug use. Like, no, that's not the point.
No, you're commenting though on something that is very real, which also a lot of people in society don't see every day.
Right, never. They don't. There's a whole. I think about this a lot. And I'll just tell you a random story to illustrate this before I go into the detail. I remember one day in my old neighborhood before I moved. It wasn't where I lived as an adult. It wasn't a bad neighborhood. It was just in the city, and I know enough about the drug game and how it works. I know enough to know that you're not storing a massive amount of product. And not everyone that's in the business is going to live in the area where the stuff is sold. In fact, why would they? Okay. And it was like midnight or something. And I was up and I just heard, it was like a rain of bullets for like 5 minutes. They pulled up on this house and just eliminated it. Drove off, doesn't make the news. Now I'm like, are we going to hear anything about this? Nope. And I said to myself, I know enough about the area I'm in, probably something related to drug trade, like because the way that was done, that's not or maybe random, but unlikely where I live. All right, so why did I tell that story? I tell that story to say that most people are like living in the world and they don't realize there are levels beneath and above them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if you don't see anything else other than what you assume that's all there is. And that sounds obvious, but we don't think about the implication of that. I can talk all day about everything I've seen. And I think this is one of the reasons people enjoy some of the writing I put out on this topic, because it's a world they're never going to touch. And that's not a bad thing. I tell you, like, you don't want your kids to see this stuff, man. And like, because for every one of me, survivor's bias is a real MF, man. Every one of me, there's 1,000 or probably a lot more, in jail, whatever. So I can see this and comment on it and then deliver it up. And I would imagine it's in reverse when you talk to people. I call it like visiting the Matrix, when you step down to deal with people who have no idea how one can make a living the way you make your living. They look at you like you got superpowers, man. From a lifestyle perspective, you're dodging bullets, okay? Mm-hmm. And then you step out and leave and go back with other people who have interacted and who from the Matrix. And there is a level, and they can't imagine your level any more than they can imagine my level. Most people are sandwiched right in the middle. Mm-hmm. And it back to what we were saying at the beginning. They don't ever go below that floor, so they don't know what's in the basement. Mm-hmm. But they ain't ever going to leave a house. Forget going to the attic. They never leaving. They're stuck there.
When I was in college, I got pulled out to go to Iraq. I came back and there's two stories that always immediately jump to mind about this idea of a kind of understanding the people who are ahead of you and the people who want to be in your position, right? Because that's really what it ends up being is everyone's looking up. It's just there's very few people who look up and there's nobody else up, right? And it's like there's like 5 people in the world. But the first was when I came back. I was a white dude with a shaved head who a bunch of these dudes on the football team knew was he went to Iraq. There was like 4 or 5 kids that maybe 6 months after I've been back, I said something to one of them and he had this look like he saw like a ghost. And I'm like, what's up? And he goes, bro, I was never going to talk to you. He's like, you got a shaved head. You went to war. Like, fuck that. Right. And so like this idea of I had an experience in life that they couldn't, even comprehend. By the way, this same kid went to a school, I think it was in Ohio or something. I remember him telling me like, dude, we had clear backpacks and walked through metal detectors and like all this. And I was like, that was in my high school, right? So like, okay, like we both have these experiences in life that we probably could learn from each other, but just it's hard to understand without actually going through it. And the second thing was, got paid some money while I was away in the military. And I came back and I was a young kid, no wife, no girlfriend, no kids, no responsibilities outside of like survive in this college environment, which is basically a cakewalk compared to where I just was. And so somebody who I admired had told me about foreign currency trading. That just sounds like a get rich scheme. Get rich real quick. So I started doing this, and I remember I was sitting in class, and I'll never forget it. I was in a Chinese economics class, and I was sitting in the back. I had my laptop up, and I could see everyone else. Everyone else taking notes, doing all what they're supposed to be doing. And I'm like not trading, but I'm like looking at the charts and everything. A kid on the football team sitting next to me. And I remember he kept like kind of looking over and being like, the fuck is this guy? This guy's just as dumb as me, right? He's like, what's he doing with this? And so when we left, he said, yo, Pomp, let me ask you a question. Like, what was that? Oh, it was foreign currency stuff. And he goes like, how does it work? And I told him like super high level, right? Like there's these things, they move. And if you pick the right bet, essentially, you can make some money. And he's like, he's like, you just made some money? I said, yeah, so far. And he's like, how much? I said, $1,000. And he literally looked at me and he goes, bro, that's better than drugs. And it's not illegal. He said, it's not illegal. And so, we started talking to whatever. He came from Washington, D.C. area, not the best area in the world or whatever, but like to get rich quick, that was his experience was people would go into drugs or just do things that weren't go get a 9-to-5 job or whatever. And so it's funny because like those are like very kind of closed environment. You're on a college campus, it's like weird things that people don't interact with on a day-to-day basis. But if you extrapolate that out, just the United States versus other, societies in the world, that alone, we don't think about how fortunate we are to be in a country where, look, you can go say some crazy shit on the street and you're not going to get abducted and killed.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you go to the extreme example, like there are societies in the world where a woman cannot walk outside without her face covered. Mm-hmm. Like that's a pretty big fucking difference than what we have here in the United States.
And if you never, being aware of it is one thing, right? Mm-hmm. I think one of the best things about the internet and social media, there's a lot of negative and people, it's very easy to point out the negative, but I think one of the best things about it is that it really does allow you to interact with, albeit sometimes in a rather explosive manner, other cultures. But if you're willing to learn, you get to see a lot about the world that you had no concept about. And you get like a first-hand, real-time experience and conversation and perspective from people on the ground there. 20 years ago, that wasn't really a thing. But now it is, okay? But to go and live it, to experience it, even not to that extreme, but to just talk to people who are not American, who live every day not caring or knowing about the stuff you consider to be important, that you consider really important, people have told you are important. Like, for example, like our politics. And politics, everyone makes a big deal. It goes, it's about governing the United States and you live here and you have to care about this and you need to be brought up and this makes a big difference. And because I spend, I wouldn't say like a lot, but certainly more than the average person, time out of the country, I'm just like, there's a lot of other stuff going on. This is just one thing. There's a whole group of people who they don't even get a chance to vote in our election because they're not citizens. And I think about that a lot. That a lot of people have their world. And their world is important. And in their world, they can decide whether they want to interact with other worlds or double down on staying in the world that they have, in the world that they know, and what makes them most comfortable. And I think most people choose the comfort option, of course. But one way or the other, sooner or later, you get introduced to something different, and whether you're prepared for it or not is a totally different story.
One of the funniest things to me in the world is that the United States taxes illegal immigrants.
They tax crime too, isn't that crazy?
Hold on, let's rewind here for a second. So we're worried about all this stuff, right? But the United States basically was built on the idea of no taxation without representation. And we got people who get taxed, but they don't have a say.
You know what blows my mind in that same vein is, when I was considering I'm still going to do it. I'm just not going to do it the way I had anticipated because I just know more now, right? When I was going to grab my citizenship in Portugal, and I was just looking to learn about all the things and our tax agreement, I was like, you're telling me that if I ever stop being an American, I still got to pay taxes? Because I was an American once. That blew my mind. I was like, why would I ever get rid of my citizenship then? Like that, I get rid of that. That's the worst of all worlds.
Yeah. Well, so some people have kind of gotten to this now, but that if you were to renounce your citizenship, you get taxed that day on all your assets, right? As if you died. So basically, call 50%, give or take. But you know why they do that? There's a guy who was actually a co-founder of Facebook, who he renounced his citizenship. He, I think, moved to Singapore, hit a couple $1 billion worth of Facebook stock. And at the time, there was no rule.
Wow.
So if you renounce, you're good, right? If you're a citizen, no matter where you live in the world, wherever your residency is, you pay Uncle Sam. But if you renounce, then you're good. Now, you don't have the citizenship, right? And so it comes down to the question of how important or how valuable is it? But if you got billions of dollars,
and you take on Singapore, which is like one of the passports and citizenships that is more that gives you more access than an American.
So after this guy did this, they were like, hey, hold on a second here. We're not going to let this fly. So they implemented this rule. And so it's always funny because you can look at a lot of tax law, and it's because someone somewhere figured out some loophole or did something, and then they're like, okay, let's close that. Let's change this.
And they decided it was too much, and so now we got to pay.
If he had done it with 100 million, no one would have cared. We did a couple billion, and they're like, let's close that one.
Well, this is wild. Yeah.
Right. The other tax thing that's pretty interesting is, I don't know if you've heard of these opportunity zones. So opportunity zone is basically under Trump, they came up with a map essentially, and they went into cities and they said, this is not necessarily a bad area, but just an area that has received less investment. Mm-hmm. And so taxes can serve as a carrot or a stick. So let's go ahead and put an incentive in place. If you take capital and you invest it in the pre-selected areas and you hold it for 10 years, right? There's a lot of nuance, but basically if you hold the investment for 10 years, you don't pay taxes. So if you make a long-term investment in areas that we're telling you need investment, then we will give you favorable tax treatment. One of the guys who helped push that through is Sean Parker from Facebook and all this, right? And so you start realizing it's like, well, how did that law get in place? Because some guys who were rich were like, yo, we got a great idea, right? Let's go and pitch it and do all this stuff. And so when you start to realize that a lot of laws and regulations and legislation and all stuff is like, there's usually, it traces back to one individual was like, I think something should change. And people either get on board or they don't, but like, that's how the rules get made.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes, man, is from The Wire. And the detective goes, if you follow drugs, you're going to get drug addicts and drug dealers. But if you follow the money, you don't know where the fuck you're going to end up.
It's true.
And I think about that. That is, what is The Wire? The Wire's 11 years old at this point. And I think about that. What a poignant observation about everything in our world, not just the low level, but politics in particular too.
Yeah. It it makes you think hard. Well, one of the things that's interesting about you is you've said that you've had 4 lives, and I think a lot of people don't think of their lives kind of in almost chapters, right? But I think we're unique in that there's like almost like adolescence, right? Then there's this element of if you serve in the military in any capacity, there's like kind of a time box around that time.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's very, very weird, right? And people who have been in the military, I think, can understand that. People who haven't, they'll be like, "What do you mean? Like you know, whatever." Nah, it's just like that's a time in your life. And then there's these other chapters. Your 4 chapters, I think, couldn't be more different. It feels like, right? And you've really kind of transitioned between this. Do you ever think that you're all 4 of those people, or do you just think of it as I used to be this person and now I'm like a new person?
I am, if I'm going to like look at a transition point, a real differentiation between each life and whatever life comes up, I think it all comes down to what my priorities were and what my weaknesses were at the time. So, you know, kind of what's driving me and what is holding me back. And sometimes they're the same thing, you know, like in my mid-20s, my priority was pretty much, you know, drinking and chasing girls. Imagine how that holds you back from making progress. I look back at it now in my late 30s and I go, wow, of course it's obvious. And then I'm like, well, why am I having these issues in my life? Well, because that was my priority, but it was also my obstacle. But I think it's very easy for me to separate that out because there's these clear blocks. I mean, because of the people I was around and the things I was doing and the feedback I was receiving and what I knew and all that, they look like different worlds and they have different experiences in each world. But I'm a product of everything that I've gone through and learned from the lucky breaks and the tough breaks. You're a product of all of it. You don't get to leave any of that, you know, behind. And thank goodness, because if you don't learn from your mistake, you're gonna repeat them. The thing about getting older is that what was the best way I've put this? If you take care of a problem early, you get a discount on it. If you take care of it when it shows up, you're gonna pay MSRP. You're paying sticker price. But if you delay it, you're gonna pay a tax and a penalty on it, and it might exceed your capacity to. And I came up with that when I was thinking about the drinking thing. Yeah,
when did you start drinking?
I started, this crazy, I say relatively late, like 18 is relatively late. But yeah, that's when I started, but it was out of hand and it was causing me to make just awful, terrible decisions.
Right out of the gate, you just drank a lot.
Right out the gate, you know, and there's no half step in here. We were just talking about that.
Anything worth doing is worth overdoing.
Right, you know, and fortunately, you know, I've never been able to be a moderate guy. That's, you know, I actually had, a lot of people don't know this. I've been sober now, it'll be 9 years this December. A lot of people don't know I had another period of sobriety from, it was like a year and a half, I think. I can't even remember. No, it was longer than a year and a half. It was like from 20 to 23. I didn't drink because I don't know the middle. Mm-hmm. There's no middle here. Why would I? Like, it cracks me up, man. I can watch my girl. She'll open a bottle of wine because she wants some wine. She'll open a bottle of wine, pour a glass, and drink half that glass and forget it was there. And that bottle then will sit there for like 3-4 months before she even goes back to it. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? We used to go through 2-3 a night when it was time to drink a bottle of wine. Not us together, because she has been a great influence, but in general, us as in the drinking community, 2-3 a night. So there's no middle there. But when I look at that time of my life, it's an example of a life that if I didn't get in front of that problem, I was going to pay a big tax on it, and got close. Because, you know, there's, when you get in front of your problems and you express real remorse and you express the desire to change and you stick with that change, people forgive a lot, probably more than they should, right? Because you really are making an effort, and you made the effort, and it shows you serious. Like, I'm sure nobody would took me seriously when it was a month in, a year, and a lot more people were like, 5 years, and I was like, okay, this dude is for real. It's not just an act or whatever. But imagine if I you say that and you go back and do it again, and every time it's like, oh man, I'm done drinking, I'm done being an asshole, and you go back and you do it again. Like, no, it means nothing. It means nothing. I always say that if I had to go behind bars to stop drinking, imagine that. Then no one cares if I stop. Mm-hmm. Then it's society made me stop, and I've done some damage likely. And
you just stopped cold turkey, or
I stopped.
or you kind of weaned yourself off?
It's funny, man. I went through these phases. So in 2012, September 2012, I had moved back to Pittsburgh, where I'm from, where I live now. I was out in Los Angeles for like 2 years because of something related to boxing. So I moved back, and I would do these on and off things, man. Like I tried to go. I was like, I'm gonna go 1 week without drinking and see how it is, and go 30 days without drinking and see how it is, and get back on and go hard and go the other way, right? And then finally, when I came back from my basic, I did my basic, and then I did my AIT. My AIT was 22 weeks down in Fort Lee, Virginia. Basic was in Fort Leonard Wood. Did that together. They let out, I think I got back like December 18th, something like that. Then went out and drank crazy, made a fool, and got somewhere, and I didn't remember getting there. I just knew I drove, and I was like, yo, this is mad. And I got a bunch of stuff in the line. I like cared about myself more, as weird as that goes. And then I was able to finally like stop. But I made like not a public declaration, but I texted my 5 closest friends, and I was like, I'm just letting you guys know, I think I got a real issue. I'm going to stop. I understand if you guys don't want to kick it anymore. Because I think a lot of people who stop drinking are worried about that. And rightfully so, because if they're not good friends, like I've lost friends. I mean, they didn't like cut me out and be like, we can't be friends, but they stopped hanging out with me, or 2 or 3 years in, when they saw I was serious and my life was making progress and moves, then, we shifted away.
Misery likes company.
Oh, and not just misery. That's only part of it. But more than misery, people like feeling like they're in a position of superiority. That people do not like when the status changes, and it changes because you moved it, not because they moved. They're not very happy about that. Like people can cope with them falling off and you staying there, but when they stay still or think they're doing well, and then you make a change and you leapfrog them, it's a different game entirely. But we made those, I made those changes, and then it was able to stick. And I was busy. I had things that I was working on. It was my fighting career. I was back in school. What else was going on? I was writing for the website. Was trying to be a decent boyfriend. I was doing well, and it's worked because she's still here, Yeah. 10 years later, and something else.
And when you said that you were going to stop, so the reason I'm so interested in this is in January of 2021, on January 1st, the night before I got hammered, as I think most people do on New Year's. And all through 2020, like I've never been a huge drinker, but I like going out, I like partying, doing all this stuff, especially, in my 20s and stuff. And for whatever reason, during the pandemic, I joked that like I kept the liquor store in business down the street in New York City, right? And I was just getting wine, but I would go and I'd pour a fat, glass of wine. I could not do what your girlfriend was doing, right? In terms of drink a little bit and then just whatever. I was just drinking, but it wasn't like I was addicted. It was almost out of like a boredom, right? Because there was nothing to do. You're sitting inside, 5 o'clock, bam, all right, let's get a glass of wine. And so I was just like, man, not maybe as coherent as you would being like, hey, I have a problem, as much as it was like January, dry January. I've never done that before. That sounds cool. Let's see how I feel if I just don't drink. And I started to take health a little bit more seriously, sleep more, do all these different things during the pandemic, whatever, because I had time to kind of think about like, all this stuff. And after 30 days, I actually felt pot committed.
Right.
Because I felt like I was on a streak, right? Like a hot streak. I can't drink on day 32, right? Because I get 32, 33, whatever. And I haven't drank since. And so it's been almost a year and 9 months or whatever, but I don't have the same, I think, sense of like accomplishment maybe as you do in the sense of you were like, I have a problem, I got to correct it. And what I think about a lot is like, fortunately, I think most people probably are more in my seat than in yours, where they drink, but they don't think that they have a problem. They don't think it's like, quote unquote, too much.
Yeah.
It's more so just like, maybe I should drink less. Right. And it's less of like a black and white. Like in some ways, the black and white of like, I have a problem, let me stop.
It's a lot easier to navigate.
It's easier, right?
Yeah, that gradient, man, I just don't do well with it. And that's in anything in my life. I mean, while I'm sitting here right now, I had my coffee this morning that I made in the room. Then the coffee that they brought me, and then I got to the studio a little early, and I said, let me walk down and get a coffee at McDonald's. I got a coffee here. The difference is after 3 coffees, I'm not slurring my speech and making an ass of myself, so we can do that. But that middle ground, I think so. First of all, on alcohol, I'm not like anti, alcohol, leading a prohibition charge or anything like that. If you want to drink, you want to drink. With that said, I always remind people there is no health benefit to alcohol, right? It is in the purest sense of the word a poison. It's one we handle, better than cyanide, but like it's still not. Like your body's gonna be okay without it. Even our sweets, one could argue you need carbohydrates. We'll not argue. You do, but and then sugar is just the carbohydrate. And I bring that up to say, some people go, oh, you don't need sweets either. I'm like, okay, you don't need sweets, but the things that sweets are made out of, you do need. Is where I go with that. Not the case with alcohol. So it's this ground, but it's not going to a glass of wine here or there is not going to kill you. Though there's a great movie, this is a side note, one of my favorite movies, one of the best ones I've seen, called Shot Caller. And Shot Caller is about this guy. I think he's like some type of insurance or trader or something like that, like a white collar dude. And he goes out with his wife and their friend, and he has like a few glasses of wine and gets into a car accident and ends up doing because the guy, I can't remember if the guy died or whatever, but he ends up doing like a year and a half in jail. But they sent him to like for real no shit prison. I think it was like Chino or San Quentin or something like that. And while he's inside, he clicks up with the white gang, and they ask him to do something, and he ends up killing somebody in a fight, and he gets 7 years. So he goes from 1 year to 7, and it's about his transformation from this guy who is just a regular old dude who has a job and a family and all that to
insurance salesman
to become a shot caller in prison. and what I took away from that movie, though, when I watched it, it's a great movie. The lead actor is the guy who plays Jamie Lannister. I can never remember his name. But one of the things I took away from it was like, yo, imagine going out it's not like he was drunk and got into the accident. It was just he just happened to have a BAC when he did, and that's how your life goes down the shitter. Is you had a few glasses of wine, completely not impaired whatsoever, but things just it's a coin flip. I think about this idea of coin flip a lot.
Well, humans are adaptable too, right? You could take a human and put them in the insurance business, and they have some path, and depending on their personality, the environment, like all these different things, they adapt. And I think of it as like they're playing a role in the movie, right? In the movie of life of like, you ever like meet somebody and you're like, bro, you could have done 7 other different things, and you're here and you got the suit and tie on, but like you do not want to be wearing that suit and tie right now.
I got a good friend. One day, he was actually my best friend growing up when we were kids, because I lived in 2 projects. I lived in, anybody who's from Pittsburgh, they'll recognize these names, but I'm give them because they're important. From birth to 8 years old, I lived in the Hill District projects up in Addison Terrace. Then we moved to Northview Heights, and that's where I lived until I was 18. Those are both projects. Well, my friend, when I was a kid, was this kid, who, very similar. The world's strange, man. We were good friends. His birthday was a week before mine. I don't know if you're into astrology or anything like that. But no, we were really good friends. And then we split off. We kind of stayed in touch, and then I didn't hear from him for years, and his social media made it easy to get in touch. And I reached out to him and we connected and started talking, and life was good. But the first time we met up at a bar, and he was conned out of it. And then I didn't hear from him again for like 2 years. And then we linked up again, and he was like, "Oh, I want to apologize for how I was the last time we met. I think he was like detoxing or something because he was just about to go to jail because he managed to become one of the most one of the most powerful drug dealers in the city by sheer luck and some sloppy police work when they busted him. They busted him. They were waiting to catch him with all the drugs in the house, everything, to put him away. And I think they jumped the gun or something. This is the story he told me. And when they made the raid, he was out doing the re-up and was able to discard the product. So when they pinched him, he didn't have a bunch of weight on him. And when he was telling me, because one day he just sat down, like, and I recorded it. It was a cool conversation. He was telling me everything, how he moved from like weed to heroin, how he started in high school selling and everything, how it all worked. And I'm listening to this and I'm watching him now because he still got the same personality and talents and gifts. And I'm just like, man, you could have been anything. But where you ended up and what was around you, you took your acumen and your skills for leading people and you became the plug. And I was like, wow, that's crazy to me. Just listening, because now he's doing, this is funny, man, how this stuff works. Now he's doing substance abuse recovery work, helping people get off the stuff. And has also got his music on the side. He works and everything. And I think it's really cool when you mention that there are people who can do anything. And I think about my friend in the same boat, because if we had stayed together and I had moved and I'm coming up with him, I mean, I naturally, for whatever reason, we all come out a little different. I naturally have a little more regard for the law, a little more fear of its consequences. But I could have ended up right next to him, and we could have been running and ruling things together. But I don't know. I'll never know, because I went down a slightly different path, and that little divergence made a big difference.
It also makes me think of Jay-Z's got a new verse on DJ Khaled's album God Did, and in it he basically is talking about the fact that he used to sell drugs. And now he's like, now they got weed in the stores. Yeah. He's like, how crazy is that? Right? Like just 20, 30 years ago, you could get locked up, you could go to jail, your entire life could be derailed.
For something that now you go
to the grocery store.
Look like the Apple store now, man. You go
wild, right? And then you look at the hypocrisy of, all this talk around Brittany Griner being locked up in Russia. And now there's a lot of complexity, sensitivities, geopolitical chess. I mean, there's a lot going into it. But at the end of the day, what we're talking about is a substance that she's locked up for there. And we've seen multiple people come out and say, wait a minute, we got people locked up for similar shit here in the United States, right? And so, like, is it hypocritical? Is it, no, it's the geopolitical sensitivity that's playing into it? Like, you start thinking about it, it's like, wait a minute, we got people in cages for plants.
One of the things, and I keep meaning to like do a deep dive on this, because I have an intuition based on what I've experienced growing up that informs this opinion, but I haven't done a deep dive into the numbers. So I always like to preface that so people don't think I'm just talking out my ass and don't know what I'm talking about. I am, but it's based on my experience, and if the numbers contradict me, then the numbers are right. A lot of those people in jail for weed, they're not in jail just for some weed. One of the things that happens when you sell an illegal substance is you don't have the protection of the law. So you have to compete differently. And a lot of those competition methods, well, those are problematic, especially when we start talking about big weight, or anything that is hard, like what they consider hard drugs, when you pretty much like, the coke and its derivatives, crack, right? So That's like a different thing. People go, we can debate the difference between the laws on coke and crack, but that's a different argument because no one is going, okay, coke's legal, we should be releasing the crack dealers. Talking about the weed, I don't, unless if you're moving big way, yeah, then we start looking at your case and go, should you be out? You should be, not even a doubt. Should we be removing stuff off people's records? Absolutely. That is a big problem. But I don't think there are people who are doing big sentences like football numbers in jail. I don't think there are people doing anything like that because
just for
weed. And even just moving, I don't remember what the amount difference is for distribution versus consumption or something like that. But I know that I don't even think even in the early 2000s where I would be like mostly aware of it and it wasn't just like a thing in the background noise in my life as I was when a kid. I don't think anyone was really. I mean, you had to get caught with a lot of stuff, but with enough to where they were like, "Where do you're not smoking this all on your own," pretty much. And that was the big deal.
The one that always cracks me up is when they arrest somebody and they're like, he had a lot of money on him. I'm like, okay, how much is a lot?
Right.
And they're like, he has $700. And I'm like, I know a lot of people that got $700 in their pocket when they're walking around.
Right.
I also know a lot of people who don't have $700 in their pocket, but like, whatever the amount is. But then there's the people who are like, well, we caught him, he has $75,000
and we're like,
cash in
right. At some point, it's like, well, what are you doing with that?
So I think the other piece that's fascinating about this is there's a book, and I've mentioned it a couple times now on the show because is less about what's in the book as much as how the book came together. But it's written by Robert Greene, the guy who wrote 48 Laws of Power, Human Nature, all this.
Yeah.
And 50 Cent.
Yeah, the 50th Laws.
50 Laws.
I got that.
You got that? All right. So first thing is it looks like the Bible. Yeah. They got it all. They got the gold pages. They got the whole thing, right? But what's fascinating about that book is Robert Greene is writing the way that he's always written in a very eloquent, articulate, kind of theoretical sense. And then he juxtaposes it to 50 Cent's life. And what you realize is like 50 Cent and his lived experience is very similar to what Robert Greene is talking about. They just use completely different language. And they had never had any clue that the two of them existed until Robert wrote a book and 50 Cent reached out to him and all this stuff. But it's like, man, that tells you a lot about society right there.
Human nature is the same. I made a tweet about this and someone commented something interesting that I agree. And the tweet was about, I don't think that people need to get their ass kicked for disrespecting people, but I do think you need to be aware that there's a penalty for disrespect. And usually the deterrent, that penalty is enough to deter people from acting like assholes, okay? And that's like the whole idea that, Mike Tyson has said, like, people have gotten way too comfortable with disrespecting people from behind social media because no one thinks they're going to get punched in the face. And look, I'm not a pro-violence guy. In fact, I'm probably the most peaceful fighter you're ever going to meet. But
people who know how to conduct violence are pretty much pacifists until it's time to
because I know how bad it can get and how quickly, right? With that said, somebody said something real interesting, and I was like, "Yeah, that makes sense." And he goes, a lot of the societies were civilized because men got together and were like, "Okay, if we make these mistakes, we're going to kill each other, and that's not good for anybody. So let's come up with a set of rules and to make it real clear and a set of conduct, expectations for conduct." So it's very clear when someone's being disrespectful and what they expect for that confrontation, right? Which pretty much eliminates, this is why I hate passive aggression. I mean, I really think it's a weak thing to do because what passive aggression tries to do, it tries to get the benefit of a conflict without paying the price for it. It tries to... You try to make, get a jab in or get something, snarky or whatever. But you do it in such a way to where it's not obvious that you're doing it or try to. So when somebody freaks out, you maintain plausible deniability. Well, in a depending on your perspective, more primitive or more advanced society, you wouldn't be able to do that. You have to speak clearly and make your point. Otherwise, you just get ignored or you don't have one. And if you make a point and it is in disagreement with someone else's, you got to express that in a certain way. Otherwise, you're inviting trouble. There's certain things you just don't do. Those invite trouble, you know? So I think about that a lot. The wording changes because we all use a different language and a different vernacular. You know, our lexicon is filled with different words and things like that to describe the same thing that we're observing, and we're all observing human nature. We just come up with different words for it. So, you know, Robert Greene and his education and his writing, and 50 Cent with his lived experience, they both have seen the same thing and have different words to describe it, but it overlays perfectly. And then because it's from two different perspectives, you create, it's not 1 + 1 = 2, it's like 1 + 1 = 7.
Yeah.
And you get an even deeper and wider perspective on these things.
That book specifically talks about fear. And one of the things that I've seen you say, which I just cracked me up and I was like, damn, that is so true, is you said something to the effect of there's somebody out there with half your IQ who's accomplishing 10x what you are because they're not smart enough to doubt themselves, which is just like, yes. Like, talk a little bit more about why did you think that was so such an important point? This episode is brought to you by 8 Sleep. Good sleep is a game changer, and the 8 Sleep Pod is the best sleep machine. I sleep on it every single night. A great night of sleep allows you to be healthier, be more rested, and have more energy throughout the day. And on the brand new 8 Sleep Pod 3, you can sleep as cold as 55 degrees Fahrenheit or as hot as 110 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the secret of thermoregulation. Better sleep, better energy. Get yourself an 8 Sleep. You can go to 8sleep.com/pomp today to go ahead and get $150 off your order. 8sleep.com/pomp. Not only do I sleep on it every night, it literally changed my life, and I begged the founders to let me invest in the company. 8sleep.com/pomp. Go get yourself an 8 Sleep Pod and get a better night of sleep.
Because you get a lot of people who everything is planning, but the execution. Because the execution is where you get to find out, is it a good idea or not? That's where you face rejection. I'm working with a kid right now. He has been training, fighting. He's been in the gym, going like a real MMA and boxing for 4 years. How many fights do you think this kid got?
0.
He got no fights.
Yep.
And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, do you want to fight, or do you want to just say you train to fight? If it's the the latter, cool. It's cool. What are we talking for? But you want to fight, so go fight. Now you go sub novice, and every time we talk, he's got a reason why he hasn't done it yet, and I'm like, no, just take the fight, just do it. And when you notice that a lot of people live like that, because execution is scary. Mm-hmm. Every idea is a good idea in your head. And there are some people who are not able to deal with the idea that perhaps it's not the best idea. Perhaps reality is going to go, let's go back to the drawing board with this one. Mm-hmm. It's terrifying. It represents so much of what we're afraid of: wasted time, rejection, embarrassment. But the people who get far, they're the ones that embrace that. In fact, one of my favorite sayings is, look, when you're living true to yourself, you look forward to being rejected, because that's the most efficient way to cut out the fluff. When someone like when it is not a good idea, when it's not going to work, and you know that because the market says, yo, this is some bullshit. You can go back with it. But if you take it personally, you'll never do it. And that's the problem. People take it personally.
You ever heard the story of Elon Musk when they started Boring Company?
No.
So he's at SpaceX, and at some point, putting tunnels becomes a topic of discussion. And my theory is that they're practicing for Mars, because they believe that we're going to have to be underground for some period of time. And so if you want to get good at doing tunnels on Mars, you probably should start on Earth. But other people say it's because of traffic or whatever the reasoning is. But they're talking about it. And he basically says to a room of engineers or whatever, he says, all right, figure out could we dig a tunnel? And so they talk for a few minutes or whatever. And supposedly somebody says to him, all right, I think we could figure this out. And he goes, when can we get started? And they say, it takes us about 2 weeks. And it's on Friday. And he says, how about you go out in the parking lot right now and see how far you get by Sunday? And they literally, within 2 hours, they were out in the parking lot digging a hole in the ground to see how big of a hole they could dig. And it's like 2 weeks to most people would be like, damn, we're moving. And he was like, right this fucking second, go outside in the parking lot. Don't worry about permits. Don't worry about getting equipment. Just go outside with whatever we got and see how far we could dig by Sunday.
And look, this is something I struggle with too. That speed of implementation. Because look, the sooner you do it, the sooner you get it. And look, it might be a great idea by itself. You don't need to add anything else. You might discover something you didn't even, that we can come over. I always used to think about this in when they're doing quality testing for video games, like how they figure out all the ways this can go wrong. I always wondered that. What if they have a bunch of beta testers? They know how it should work, right? Based on their design and what they think. And even with their simulations. But until you get real people and they're testing and going, they have no idea. And that's why there's that testing period. They discover and fix these things. It's the same way with anything that goes on in your head. You get to it. You just get it out there and go quick. And look, I am not the biggest offender anymore. I'm getting better. But that planning phase is, to say overrated is incorrect, because you need something. But you need a lot less, especially when the cost for failure is so low. You know, it's not like heart surgery. Like, there's a pretty big penalty if you go in there, you get a bunch of people, and we're gonna figure this out. Oh, now let's get
the butter knife and we'll just see what happens.
Right. But when it comes to something like starting a company or writing, or not even something like that, just start a website. You want to write, start a website, right? Just get it out there, because the cost of you making a mistake is so low, but what you learn, the experience you get is so high. There really isn't a better way. What are you gonna do? Go study writing for 4 years and with your degree, now I'm qualified. Right? No, it doesn't work that way. Real world, I think that's one of the biggest changes in the real world now, is that we have moved from your credentials mattering to you watching people who know a lot less in the same field that you study making real big moves. I mean, it would absolutely. I don't even know how one gets here, but I would just be sitting there kind of hot if I'm watching. If I studied marketing for 4 years out of college, paid like $120,000, and I come out and there's this 19-year-old kid that's figured out, all I got to do is make some catchy videos on TikTok and put a link in the description. Hold up.
If you think about it, that is right now, I think a lot of street versus the boardroom. Like not my entire worldview, but a lot of my worldview is informed by those two things, which is there's the street approach, there's the street mentality, there's the street, like all these different components to life. And then there's the boardroom. And what does the boardroom do? They plan. What does the street do? Action, right? Boardroom, they sit there and they say, okay, well, you need the credentials, you need this. The street says, hey, you got the product or do you not?
Right.
Right? I mean, it's like a very different view of the world, but marketing is a great example. I actually think today, the person who is able to, take a Twitter account or a TikTok account or whatever, and then say to a company, hey, in 3 months, I went from nothing to 50,000 followers. Yep. Here's the engagement, all this stuff. And another person shows up and says, I went to Harvard for marketing. I bet you the company picks the person who's
at least the company should.
Yeah. Yeah, at least they should.
like my website, the Google has been Google. And what that means is that once the technology really became viable to implement mass, like we've always had, to my understanding, GPT-3 or something to that effect. Pretty much the predictive kind of, this is what the ability to write and the ability to read and kind of figure out what words mean quickly. And that's like a combination of a huge database and processing power. And then I guess on the last end, you need some conduit like fast internet, right? Okay, so you see this with Google Translate. And that's what Google Translate does and how it gets better and how it kind of figures out the difference between regions. And that's why like you can type something in today and get one translation and in 6 months get a better one, because it is in a sense learning. And this, and I bring this up to say that is the basis, as I understand it, for a lot of the updates Google has made to the algorithm for its searches. You know, they go in there and tweak what they wanted to emphasize and downgrade. Like, for example, it made a big adjustment back in 2019 or 2018 where, you know, if you were talking about health stuff, but you didn't have the credentials behind it, like it was a .edu or a .gov or some like WebMD or something like that, you know, you were downranking because they're like, yo, these people, you know, have credibility. You're just this site. Let's figure it out, no matter how well it's written. Why'd I bring all this up? These changes wiped out a lot. There were a lot of people that had their websites and blogs. People were complaining that these changes, you know, disrupted everything, because it wasn't just like, that's just the field I used, medicine, but, you know, the like finance, it took hits too, all of these. Well, I'm not going to give up because that's my site. We took a hit, man. We did. I was cruising along, about to crack 20,000 followers for visitors per month, organic, and then we got dinged. And I was like, all right, what are we going to do? Well, I'm going to learn SEO. I'm going to learn the street way, though, which is pretty much what I did, man, because everything in my mind, I'm actually like putting it together now so I can teach somebody directly, and then from there I'll probably produce a product. But I learned a lot about how SEO works because I had a vested interest in having my site work. And now last I checked, you know, this is over 3 years almost now, but been figuring out, taking different dings, learning, seeing what works, what doesn't, and figuring out tools. Well, now it's 60,000 visitors per month organic. And that is because I didn't give up, and it continues to bump and go up. But it's all from that street approach. Mm-hmm. In fact, I didn't take any classes until like, and even someone's course. I didn't do anything probably until the last 3 months when I was well on my way up. But I was like, oh, let's learn and see if there's anything I don't know, because I've been figuring out a lot here. Let's see who else knows what. And I think that's really the best approach. Even learning works this way, I think, great too, because every time I come to Miami, I'm reminded of, sometimes I feel good about my Spanish, and other times I'm just like, okay. Right? But the way, I discovered a method on YouTube, and I was like, wow, this guy's brilliant. He put together this thing where he took himself to fluent in French and Spanish in 45 days, right? Wow. Now he did it, devoted 8 hours per day, which I don't, have, but you look at it and you can pull a lot from it. And one of the things I took from it, this was so cool. One of the things you do, you sit and you tell a story very personal to you. All you do is you just need to have the ability in the language to construct a sentence. And when you don't know the word you want to use for the story, you write that down, you put it in the translator, you pop it in an Anki deck so you can review it. And then you come back and you just keep trying to tell the same story, until it feels, until you can go through the whole story. And a funny thing happens with this very simple bump into the wall method as opposed to studying different things. One, you've got a working vocabulary that is personal to you because you're telling a story. Like the first story I put together was like the first date with me and my wife now. And I'm like, oh, I know these words I thought I knew and I didn't know. But now I have it because it's very personal to me, and then the tense of speaking and all that. But I picked it up from bumping into the wall. Okay? That's so much better than how we typically go about teaching language, which is go and learn some grammar and here are a bunch of sentences that mean nothing to you. So why would you remember them? Like even I love Duolingo. Duolingo was based in Pittsburgh. I better love Duolingo, right? Even Duolingo, because it's just an interface and it's good for some things. No method can do this. Where you put together a vocabulary and an approach that's valuable to you, that has meaning to you. And when you do that, combined with just trying to bump into the wall, trying to talk to people and use these words, then you start to feel confident, and then you can go, okay, let me look at a book, because I'm like, man, I have no idea how to use the imperfect for this verb. And let me go look this up now. But you get a feeling that you need something like what you do for there, but for a new situation, and you know how to find it. So bumping into the wall, street method, however you want to call it. I call it bumping into the wall, but I think I'm going to start calling it the street method. Is a lot better. I've
always thought of these people as Googlers. Now, that term was co-opted by the company Google. That's what they call their employees, are Googlers. But put that aside for a second. They got the pinwheel hats.
Didn't know that. I'm going to have to remember that because...
Yeah, they call themselves Googlers. And they got the... you ever seen... I forget what the comedy movie is, but they got the pinwheel hat, like the multicolored hat, and he's got the little thing that spins at the top. That's real. They give those to the Googlers on campus. But I always think of Googler as, you ever hang out with somebody and they're just constantly on their phone or their computer, but it's everything you talk about, they don't know something, they immediately just go and they look it up. I love those people.
It's so much. We have
the world's knowledge at your fingertips.
I love this, man, because I'm always in awe of technology. I never stop being in awe of the world I'm in. I mean, we were in Juneau, and I just was watching the planes come, and I was like, man, we figured out how to put a metal tube that weighs tons into the air full of people. And stuff like that, it makes me feel in awe. Whenever I read about old cities, and I'm like, man, we have sanitation and plumbing. You can go to the bathroom and it's not going to end up on the street. That's cool. One of the things that just amazes me is that we have this handheld, not this big old room, a handheld device. And in that handheld device, you are simultaneously connected to every other human on the planet who has one, and they all have one because you need them now. And the whole sum of human knowledge is at your disposal. All you have to do is develop the skills to ask the right questions, and Google has a commercial incentive to make sure they figure out how to best pair your question with the best answer. And if they did, if you really wanted to dig deep, you just go on the dark web or figure things out, things like that. But there's so many resources and so many ways. There's no reason to not know anything.
It's crazy.
Every time someone goes, I'm not sure. Oh, let me just look it up. And there are very few situations where it's inappropriate to pull my phone out and look it up. So there's no reason to ever doubt facts. And then, and then from there, and people go, oh, that makes the conversation drop. I'm like, no. We don't have conversations to discuss and swap facts. We have conversations to connect and see perspectives and understand one another. It puts the focus back on the conversation while you have it, if you don't have to debate a fact. And it also adds clarity.
Sports is the place where you see this the most. People start debating each other, and they're pulling all the stats, right? And just, whatever. The other thing around technology, I'm reading a book right now called The Rise and Fall of American Growth, which is absolutely the worst book if you want to be entertained, but it's full. It's 700 pages of super dense information all about the economy and all this stuff. And somebody recommended it to me, and I've enjoyed it so far. But the reason why I enjoy it is the lessons are pretty simple. His argument is basically economists think that economies grow forever as long as no one touches them. I disagree. That's basically, he wrote 700 pages on it, right? But the book is littered with all these super interesting facts. So one of them is in 1908, the Ford Model T comes out. It was $950. By 1923, 15 years later, they'd gotten the cost down 70% to $269.
Wow.
Well, they used a manufacturing method where there was a line of people who were manufacturing the product, and you just did the doors, right? And okay, well, that's how we manufacture everything today. There was literally somebody who pioneered that, implemented it, and now that is how manufacturing's done. Then they talk in the book, I think it's 1870 or so, which we think of the 1800s, 150 years ago, right? All homes were completely disconnected from the world. You had an outhouse, you had water that you had to go get, like you had to be self-sufficient. By 1940, which again sounds like kind of a crazy thing, but it was only 70 years, pretty much all homes in any urban area had water, gas, electricity, like they were hooked up now, right? Or what they call networked. And so you think, man, 70 years. When someone was born, it was self-sufficient, completely unconnected world. Before they died, everything was completely different. And so you're like, okay, like that's a lot of change. But then he makes an argument where he says, the speed of transportation has not changed since 1950. When we went from the stagecoach to automobiles is not like all of a sudden we're all going 200 miles an hour, right? Like they pretty much have been going the same speed, since the 50s.
Okay.
Planes, the Boeing 707 is the example he uses, it's like 1953 or whatever, goes about the same speed. It's not like we're making these, 10x improvements over what is now 70 years in the speed of transportation. And so his point is basically like, there's very compacted time where there's immense innovation, inventions, progress, like all these changes. And then we go like really long periods of time and nothing happens. And so for you and I, we think about like Google's like a fucking crazy thing, right?
Yeah, that's
and it is around information and technology, like this information technology world. But if we actually sat here and we're like, what are the major innovations that we've seen in like the physical world over the last, 50 years? Sure, Tesla with the electric car, like we can come up with a couple.
A few, yeah.
The smartphone versus a dumb phone, like shit like that, right? Okay, I got it. But not like the invention of fucking electricity.
Right. No, something that is in fact, I think the last thing like the invention of electricity would be like the internet. Right?
And even that is still like a digital thing.
Yeah.
Now it helps, right? And this is where it gets kind of a nuanced conversation because the internet obviously drastically kind of created innovation in all these industries and all this stuff. But like it is interesting to think about how many inventions happened in a certain period of time. And then if you think today, like it's not like you and I wake up every day and we're like, damn, somebody created, like we get super excited over like pretty small stuff now. And so it leads to this conversation around like, yeah, everything is digital where all the innovation's happening.
Are you bumping to this is a new problem. And it's one that like when you talk about it, it's like, of course, but then until you run into it, you're like, wow, this is really a thing. There are no physical mediums anymore that people distribute. Like pretty much the age of physical medium for distributing entertainment is over, at least in terms because we went from in our lifetime VHS, DVD, and then they were like, yo, we can hook you up with the illegal copies of it. You're downloading, Bluetooth. Or Blu-ray, not Bluetooth, Blu-ray. And then full circle because now everything's digital. So now everything is hidden behind and now it's much easier to secure. Like good luck trying to download stuff. Now, I mean, sure you can, but you really got to be about that life. It's not like hopping on LimeWire or BitTorrent, where anyone could do it.
LimeWire was a fucking lottery. You either getting the file or you getting the virus and you didn't know which one.
You didn't know what you was getting. But now, it blew my mind. I was thinking about, because we went to a, just to watch a local band perform. And afterwards they were selling merch, selling copies of their work, and they had CDs. And I was like, where the hell am I going to play this? Like, I never thought about that before. It was like, oh, do you have the tape? Then we've been around long enough to go, oh, do they have the tape version? I don't have a CD player yet. To, oh, I'll get the CD, but do you have the MP3? Now it's like, there's only really one way to get this. Don't give me a CD. What am I gonna do with this? Like, I can't. My MacBook doesn't have one. My home, none of my.
You gotta get an extra piece of hardware to have to play the old technology.
Like, why would we have that? That's old.
Yeah, Well, the other piece I think a lot about. I'm assuming based on our conversation that you read a decent amount. Do you read physical books? You got Kindle? You do audiobooks? How do you consume books?
Okay. So it depends on what I'm reading. I will not read fiction on my Kindle or my phone.
Okay.
Right? But nonfiction I do because it's just easier to take notes and then transfer those notes out. And then on top of that, I love this little thing you do on your Kindle where you highlight a section and you can write what you're thinking and type that in. And that really helps me absorb the information and really helps me learn it. But I won't read fiction that way. I think fiction is a special thing. And if we consume it that way, I think we rob the specialness of it, which is one, it's not a note-taking medium. Mm-hmm. It's not even the thing you highlight. I mean, maybe you like see a quote you really like, but then you just go remember and write it down. But because I'm reading it in a physical book, then I know it is this thing I can take with me and immerse myself into. But when I read on my Kindle, I'm automatically thinking, all right, there's probably gonna be some information I'm gonna like take down. So I'm not reading it with the undiluted focus that I approach my fiction with.
I don't read fiction, so I can't speak to that.
Oh.
Well, here's going back to our conversation around I read a lot.
Yeah.
But I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not. And for fiction, whatever reason, it's like a lack of interest, which is probably makes me less well-rounded. But that's just what cool. That is what it is, right? But the reason why I bring this up, 3-4 months ago, up until then, I pretty much read everything, either some sort of Kindle type device or whatever, or audiobooks. I did a lot of audiobooks. Mm-hmm. I sat down and tried to read a physical book. My head hurt. I couldn't concentrate.
No kidding.
And it like pissed me off. I was like, what do you mean I can't sit and just read a book? I literally could not read the book. My head started hurting, my eyes were hurting, like all stuff. And my eyes hurt sometimes just like the fluorescent lights or whatever, right? But like, I was like, this is bullshit. I was like mad at myself, right? So for the last like 3-4 months, I only will read the physical books now. I've like forced myself to be able to read the physical books now. And so over the weekend, I was on a flight and I listened to audiobook. First time I listened to it, I felt like I was on crack. I was like, oh shit, this is 2x speed. Like I was blowing through this book, right? But then what it goes back to is like, I don't know, retention wise, like maybe I get like 90% retention out of the physical book. Maybe it's like 75% in that audio. So it's like, it's pretty similar, but definitely a little less on audio. But the physical book, it made me think, I was like, all this technology, all this information at our fingertips, all these things, like the physical book made my head hurt.
Yeah.
And all we hear about is how the computers are going to make our heads and our eyes hurt. It blew my mind.
So there's some interesting, I guess, weak, maybe strong correlations, mm-hmm. whatever, right? But we talk about, there's this rise in ADHD mm-hmm. diagnosis. And it's like, and it doesn't really make sense when you look at it. It goes, okay, we've known about this thing forever. And all of a sudden, skyrocketing the amounts of diagnoses. And I only know about this in context to a speech I gave about how boys are treated like kind of like defective girls in the school system. And one of the points I raised and how I found that data was that this raise in ADHD, boys are represented 4 to 5 times more than girls. But it's a rising tide on all fronts. Mm-hmm. And I think about this a lot in terms of screens, because although we're looking at this thing and in an ideal world, we're just focusing on pulling it in, I think by nature what screens do, with the notable exception, being if you read your Kindle that way. Screen, even with the Kindle, because you can swipe. Your screens allow you to change the speed. They allow you to be distracted, typically however you want to be. They change how you bring in the information. And if you're still bringing in the information, that means something has to fundamentally change about how you're processing it. And when you go back to a book without those things, I think my guess would be that it's like the opposite of training with weights on, and then you go take the weights off. Well, you go, I'm faster. I'm like, yeah, it's great because you're in control of it. But if you remove all these stressors, then you can't. In fact, here's a great analogy, and I just thought about this. There's this great book called The Epidemic of Absence, nonfiction, if you want to check it out. The basic thesis of The Epidemic of Absence is that our immune systems evolved in a hostile environment, full of pathogens, full of disease, full of filth, whatever, right? And now that we don't have that, we live in a clean society. You see, that's why you see this rise of allergies, because the immune system is like, yo, I need to give me something, right? That's a protein. It looks kind of like the other proteins and viruses and bacteria. I'll attack it. And so you get your allergies to, shellfish and eggs and milk, et cetera, right? And that's the other end. And then like the author goes and like infects himself with a tapeworm and it tamps down his allergies to his hay fever and stuff like that. But I think about that a lot, especially in this context, which is we have this, our immune system didn't take a break. It didn't change. Our environment changed and it was like, I'm going to attack something else. And that thing is typically helpful to you, but it looks close enough like what I'm used to dealing with. Let me go do something. Let's take that analogy and we'll use it for reading. You get used to pulling in your information just right there in front of your face. You devote all your mental activity to it because that's what you'd have to do to read. I think reading with music on is probably a relatively new thing, but I can see how it's possible without it interfering too much. But I know like I have trouble reading, especially music with words in it. I couldn't do it.
I looked this up recently because I thought to myself as I was trying to figure out the book, I said, I wonder if it's better or worse. And as you just alluded to, with words, scientifically is shown it distracts your brain. It screws up your ability to read. But even music without words, they say it's like classical music, because of distraction.
It gives me trouble. So you have this method of pulling in information, total focus, and then you bring in a new method that by its very nature of design comes with you're not turning pages. You're able to kind of skim, not as much as on in front of you at the same time as there would be with a book. You have all these new things that aren't necessarily improvements in the sense of they make you a better or more efficient reader, maybe faster, but not necessarily more efficient because your brain's like, well, I'm going to give you, I got to do something. Give me something. And there's only so many words I can pull in here. All right, we're going to mess with your eyesight, or we're going to make you, every time you see something, you'll look it up immediately and get pulled out. And we know how long it takes for you to get your focus back when it's broken on something. And so you may not even be able to focus as long as you used to be able to because your focus is now used to being broken up. Whenever you get a push notification or something like that, or you want to look something up or you want to highlight something, that's very unnatural to highlight while you're reading. We're used to just pulling in information. But this is all just my I never put these two things together before, but in this conversation, putting these ideas together, that's my guess. That's what that is, I think, or at the very least, that's an interesting explanation, and it's an easily testable one. What happens when you go back to reading without
I enjoy
the screen?
It more too.
Yeah, and you're able to focus a lot more, I'd imagine.
The one of the science research kind of paths that I find fascinating is there's a lot of work, Stoics, there's Ryan Holiday's written books, like all the stuff around just like focus, stillness, like all this type of stuff can lead to more idea generation or whatever. So if you basically sit for 30 minutes, while a lot of people get ideas in the shower, right, because they're not doing anything else, their mind kind of wanders, they think of something, whatever. But there's also a bunch of research around walking. And so the walking becomes really interesting because you could take a person and they aren't moving. That is the least, kind of beneficial thing. And then the other extreme is that they're literally walking outside. But there's this middle ground. What about walking on like a treadmill, right? Or like, you got these standing walking desks, whatever. It's actually shown that part of the value of walking to the brain is, one, there's a physical component. But two is actually the movement forward. Mm-hmm. And so the research unlocks saying like, no, if you're going to walk, like get your ass outside and walk, not mimic almost like a lab rat, walking on the trail. Now it's better than sitting or, just standing there. But the benefit to actually walking and moving through the environment, your brain does something different than just walking on like a treadmill stationary. It's fascinating.
Not only that, and this is a rare case. I can remember the name of the author and not the book. I can even see the cover of the book in my head. Weird. But Barbara Oakley is the author, and she writes about learning. It might be the science of learning, something to that effect. I'm not sure. But Barbara Oakley is the author. And she talks about the diffuse mind state versus the focus. And when we're focused, we're like we're like, the analogy she gave was the focus is you're looking at each individual dot and trying to navigate around it and figuring it out. And diffuse is where you step back and you see this whole pattern and you see the whole layout. You may not be thinking about how to get through it, but you're just observing it. Your brain's kind of working on the process to get through it in the background. One of the things that walking does, showering does, doing anything else but working on the immediate problem does, is that it lets you kind of step back. And it's always there. It's in the back of your mind. Otherwise, it's not important. But then when you're not thinking about it, that's when you make these connections that you couldn't see, kind of like, the whole forest for the trees analogy. When you're looking at the individual trees, because you're trying to get out the forest, you don't realize the path, the most optimal path to follow unless you know it. But if you step back or step up in this case, or raise up and you're able to look down and see, you go, oh, the path is really clear. But now you're out the forest. How are you going to communicate it down? Hopefully you carry it. But it's only in that diffuse mode that we make a lot of these connections, that we're able to see how things work and play together. I wasn't even thinking about the epidemic of absence, and I make this connection to reading. And those are two fields that don't really. Well, why would they ever match? But, because I was thinking and talking about this, and this is in the background, and that's like an analogy, kind of like a mental model that I use a lot, that I find a lot of people don't have, which is that, the idea that a thing has a purpose, and when you remove that purpose, the thing doesn't change. It just figures out another way to do what it thinks it's supposed to do. These connections get made.
It's tool versus environment. A lot of times, right? And I always think of it in the most extreme situations, right? So I just jumped to the extreme. So like you take a gun and all the gun debate and all the stuff that goes on in America today, right? It's like, look, there's a lot of different tools, but they can be used for good or bad. And that doesn't mean necessarily that we shouldn't address the use of the tool, or that certain people should have access or not have access or whatever. Like there's all this nuance. And you and I aren't going to solve this, whatever. But it always shocks me as to the level of elementary analysis. I
was going to say binary thinking.
Yeah,
right?
just like, yo, this is a tool. Like, can we all at least agree on that part, which is a important almost building block to have a discussion around what should the rules be. And there's like a whole group of people who just like, nah, it's not a tool.
Exactly. And it's really hard here because... something when you're learning stats, something they tell you, and you just kind of take for face value. They tell you that intelligence is normally distributed. And you just take that for face value because most people are never going to have the opportunity to verify that at all, to put it to the test. And then you get on social media and you have a large following, a lot of interactions, and you realize, holy shit, this is, not only is this true, it might actually be exaggerated. And one of the difficulties humans have, and I have no idea what, or if there's even an IQ level or something like that, or a cutoff point, is to consider contrary thoughts without being attached to or the ability to detach their personality from the thought, their ego. Because I think that's what inhibits a lot of constructive discussion is people, if I'm pro Second Amendment and I make, guns a part of my identity, right? That's who I am. I can't entertain any discussion that might reduce my access to them or anyone else's access to them. I can't do it. If I see that as part of my personality and I'm not open to any way to actually make the world a better place by perhaps perhaps by being more pro-gun. As weird as that sounds, people go, okay, I'm going to have to give ground. Well, what if you don't have to give ground? What if the ground you think you're giving actually makes your position stronger? I have this talk all the time with people about guns. Guns is just a great way.
It's the most extreme case, right?
Yeah. Well, not only is it the most extreme, it's really an easily discussable one because we have so many examples and so many not just examples of when things go wrong are right. Interestingly enough, though, for things to go right, they have to be wrong, but that's a different discussion. But we also have a lot of different debates we've seen and have them pop up. But if you entertain the idea, for example, funny how relevant these things happen. I was just having a discussion. I said, look, I'm as pro-gun as anyone can be. But I think if you're gonna have a gun, you need to train with that thing. Have you ever have you really ever gone? And this, my instructor tells me this all the time. Most people don't go to the range, and they need to go to the range because when I bring up, everyone goes, "Oh, they cite your boy." I think it was down in Texas, maybe, or Illinois, where he shot the guy who was going to do the shooting in the mall.
Oh, and I think
stopped it. And I go, look, you got to understand. I don't know where that guy got his training or where he trained, but that is a trained dude.
It's like 40 yards. He hit him 8 out of 10 shots.
At 15 yards, the average person is not going to even hit the target, let alone center mass. It's not happening. So all I proposed, I said, look, everybody who has a gun, they should have to put in training hours. I really believe that. You shouldn't be walking around with something that can end a life with just that, with just pulling a trigger, and you don't have to train with it. And the blowback I got on this idea. And they were like, I don't think people should have to train. I don't think people, if they want to have a gun, it's our God-given right. I'm like, I'm not telling you to give up your guns. What I'm saying is you'll actually be a better gun owner. Like, do you realize that? and it didn't, they couldn't give any ground on everyone should have guns.
I always like to ask people who seem to be kind of dug in on a topic. So let's take a very pro-gun person. I would ask them, is there ever an instance where you think somebody should not own a gun?
Yeah.
Right? Just again, by the way, they'll be like, no. I'm like, all right. So if somebody has killed multiple people before, has a documented mental illness, just go to the extreme, right? Like, do you think that person should have a gun? If they say yes, I'm done talking to you.
Yeah,
right.
Good.
And then you go to the other end, though, right? You say that the anti-gun people. Is there ever a situation where you think somebody should be allowed to own a gun?
Yeah.
And if they're like, no. I'm like, okay, well, what happens if somebody is breaking into your house with your child, all these different things, right? And if they still say, no, I don't think they should be able to defend themselves, okay, I'm done talking to you too.
That's actually, that's a great tactic. That's probably going to save me a lot because my weakness on the internet, I'm one of the, I would like to think anyhow, I'm one of the more patient, respectful people on the internet. That's changed a little bit, but only because one of the cool things about knowing you have a kid on the way is you start thinking about what's important. Yeah. And I'm like, your stupid opinion isn't important to me. I have no interest in changing it. That's relatively recent, but I'm sure it'll go. I'll go back to my baseline. But I tend to give people the benefit of the doubt. And I think overall that's a good strategy because it allows me to at least have a conversation and see where they're at. From a tactical perspective, I have a good strategy, but that's a sound tactic to ask to start. Okay, do you think there's ever an instance where you would change your stance? Okay, well, and then you give some, they go, nope. I go, well, then we can save ourselves some time. But if we can find some ground, we're like, I guess that's common ground. If we're going to debate about guns and we can both find that common ground, there's a situation where you should not have one. Okay, now we can talk. But if you're not even,
it's my way to filter. I just want to know I'm talking to a person who can have a rational conversation.
Yeah, that's a good way to go.
Like I have no interest in talking to irrational people where it's become a religion, right? Or it's become
Because you're never going to get through to that.
I don't talk to people and try to convince them to give up their religion, right? And if you do that, amazing. I feel if that makes you happy, that's great. I'm guessing the success record of that is pretty low, right? Yeah. And so if you then just say to yourself, like, cool, I just want to talk to people who can see a little bit of nuance. That's okay. We don't agree, but at least it's like a good faith conversation where I know that, like, all right. Right. You see a piece of the conversation that the most extreme in your camp don't see, and that then makes it at least worth the time to start a conversation.
You know, always, man, why these conversations are great because, once again, another insight that just came to me that I never really made on my own. So I think that's a defining characteristic of someone who would be considered extremist, at least to me, because I'm really fascinated with the idea of, one, what makes a person extreme, and two, do people who are on their side but not as extreme see them as extreme or not? Those are two really interesting questions to me. And that idea that, okay, can you see a situation where your perspective is incorrect, or at the very least your perspective is inadequate, where there needs to be a modification? If you can't see that, then yeah, I think that would qualify as someone who's extreme. But if you can see how it'll change and be then it's different. And I think that's a really good. If I apply that filter to a variety of social issues, not that we face everything from race to religion, to abortion or guns. You apply that filter to it, you can pretty much suss out relatively quickly who the extremists are and who are the people who can have reasonable conversations.
I think that if you take this exact same framework and during the debates on the political side, every candidate should have to answer what is one thing that your candidate believes that you agree with that goes against your own party. And if you say nothing, you're disqualified. Yeah. Right? Like to some degree, that alone, like, what is something that the other person believes that you tend to believe more than what the standing, kind of line in the sand of the party is?
But politics, at least in this country, they've done a really. It would be impressive if it wasn't so destructive. They've made it so there's we'll just say left and right. There are the ideas on the left and the ideas on the right. All right. And the odds if you believe one idea on the left, the odds you believe in the other ideas are pretty high. Whether that's accurate or not is irrelevant. What is relevant is that I can typically, with some accuracy and consistency, if I know how you feel on one thing, I'll know how you feel on a bunch of other things. Okay. They've weaponized this because now you can't, let's say you're left leaning on the abortion issue, right? But you're pro-gun. Pick one. You can't be both. Even though those things are not related, you're either going to be you got to decide, are you going to go on everything for the left or everything on the right? But they're not going to let you mix and match. And the people who do that, they almost... like an insult, almost like centrist, because no one wants to be called a libertarian anymore because now they're trying to make that like, just a way to be a right winger. That's what they say because they don't want that neutrality. Even street gangs recognize neutrality, man, but not politics.
The thing that I do believe is a very powerful force in politics right now, which no one is acknowledging or talking about, is the weaponization of extremism, where there's pulling to the extremes, which I think people recognize that, and they say, okay, X candidate or X politician, they are on the extreme of that party, right? So we recognize that. But what people aren't yet talking about is the labeling of extremism. So the right-winger thing is like a perfect example where it doesn't matter what you actually believe. Right? Like, I've heard Joe Rogan talk about the fact that they were like, oh, this right-leaning Republican, blah, blah. He's like, I voted for fucking Democrats my entire life. Right?
Yep.
And I don't know, maybe it's a nostalgia or whatever, but 20 years ago, if somebody came out and said, I am a Democrat, I vote for Democrats, I whatever, then like people are like, that's a Democrat. That doesn't happen now. It's all about the label. The label's actually almost more important than what they thought. And now in reverse, it works the same way. The right will label certain people and say, that's socialist. That's whatever the terminology that kind of proves the point. And so if you kind of, again, just take a step back and you look at kind of the whole playing field, what you realize is it's not about the truth.
Nope.
It has nothing to do with the truth. This is all a propaganda war that is being fought by two different factions. And if it wasn't in the United States, if we looked at it and this was Iraq, for example, you know what the storyline would be in the United States? The two warring factions led by, like the language would be so different. And we would all sit there in the United States and we'd be like, that's crazy, and move on with our day because it's our politics.
No one sees it. You know, one of the observations I made, that look, here's the problem with being I would like to consider myself a free thinker. Now, I will also say at the same time, a lot of people who consider themselves free thinkers happen all think the same, and don't you think that's funny? But
canceled.
Yeah. but one of the things about being black is you're expected to think and toe a certain line, and I think that's one of the most destructive things that can happen is people look at me. And when I say people, I mean a general group of politically motivated people who see me being black as a card to play. They get them on our side, speak, platform, whatever. Okay, but when I question things that I go, well, that's not racist, right? And you try and get them to pin down a definition of racism, and then they can't do that. I think one of the dangers here, and I get to say it because I'm, or at least I used to. Now I'm an Uncle Tom and a coon when I bring it up. But I can say that's not racist. Like, you might not like how it feels, but let's not throw it and call it racist. And here's the thing: when you call everything that's a slight against you, when you try and put a racial spin on it, then what happens is actual racism it gets to slip in because you don't even recognize it anymore. Like, there's this great video about the voter ID laws where the guy goes and asks a bunch of people on Berkeley's campus what they think about voter ID laws, and everyone's like, oh, they disproportionately affect minorities because they have less money and they can't figure out the internet and they can't go get to the DMV, and so we need these. And I'm sitting here listening. I'm like, do you hear? Like, you don't hear. Like, that's the real racism, to assume that because. And then he goes by contrast and goes into Harlem and asks a bunch of black people, like, yeah, I know what a DMV is. Like, everybody's got the ID. You can't even get.
You can't buy alcohol without it.
Everything. So I thought that was, like, when I saw that, I was like, wow. Because we're not allowed to question, or they try to make it so you can't question things or pin down definitions, and that's a totally different conversation. The manipulation of our language and really trying to make it ambiguous so that it can fit whatever purpose we need it to fit. All right, let's call it racist when we introduce, when we oppose something called the voter ID law, but it's not racist when you go over the reasons which all center around degrading, at the very least, pointing out our lack of function. That's why we need it. We obviously can't get to the DMV. Then we have a problem. And so that is one of the other problems with politics today is the manipulation of these labels. And I think words are powerful, man. I think that's why I'm drawn to them, because I understand how powerful they are. And if you watch, it's the manipulation of these things is incredible.
Did you see the Black Lives Matter donation / lawsuit?
Yep.
So I don't know a ton about this. I saw a headline. I think I read 2 paragraphs. I want to be careful that I don't fuck up any of the facts, frankly.
Okay.
But there was one specific sentence in this statement that my head was in a blender. I couldn't understand kind of how this all plays out. So I would love to hear kind of you riff on a little bit. There's 2, I guess, factions, right, that kind of come out of the situation. There was a bunch of money that was donated. One of the co-founders being accused of taking or using $10 million. It's basically a personal slush fund.
Yeah.
That's my words, not theirs, but that was just the general kind of accusation. That individual appears to almost be saying like, the other group is using the white man system to oppress me. And so when I saw like, it just like on that alone, it was just one of these situations where I was just like, holy shit, we're headed into a world. Like, I don't even worry about like today. It's like 10 years from now. Mm-hmm. It almost gets to the point where like, it will be impossible to navigate the world without offending someone.
Yep. And whether that's by design or not, that's a different conversation. But when you decide that words don't, when you strip away the meaning of a word, right? Mm-hmm. Or you modify it slightly, but there's a consistency. We understand that. That's what a dialect kind of is. Mm-hmm. You know, you use these words a certain way, and we all agree with that, what they mean. The problem is when you are allowed to change them whenever the situation suits you, and then no one calls you out or checks you on it. Like oppress. Who's oppressing you? You have $10 million, man. Like that's like it's crazy that one can go can say that with a straight face because you know hopefully you know the powers that be take care of this problem. But let's navigate the mindset to get you to the point where you think that's an okay, like, and probably genuine believers. I don't think it's a cop out. I think
that's another important piece of a lot of things, not just race related, just like across society. I do always ask myself, given the facts that are publicly known, does it appear that this person actually believes what they're saying?
Yeah.
And I actually do think in most cases, people do believe what they're saying, which almost makes it crazier.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because you're like, oh, no, that person really believes that. They're wrong. They're like completely wrong. But they do believe what they're saying.
Like you can correct ignorance, or at the very least you can remedy it, you know, by putting the correct information in front. But insanity, you almost by definition, you can't really do anything about that. So when a person says that they really think they're being oppressed, that they really think they suffered at the hands of something, you know, how do you prove to them that they haven't? How do you get them to go, no, it's not quite that way. Yeah, you can't do it. So, you know, well, man, the whole BLM thing, I used to think it was just somebody's really bad marketing, and that's what they called it BLM. Because if I'm going to attack it, like let's say I'm an opponent and I'm going to attack them, I'm going to go, well, they're you know, Chirac was on fire this weekend, or you know, and there was a lot of black lives. You know, do those not matter? But they only matter when they are taken out the hands of what you believe is someone who you can profit from and rile people up. I used to think that was just bad marketing. And now I am almost 100% convinced it's intentional. If you call it this good name, and in that sense, it's brilliant marketing. You call it this name. It's very easy to get behind. Very simple. Black Lives Matter. Let's get out there. They matter. And then in the fine print that no one sees, no one reads, they matter when the police officer shot them as white, when the crime that happened against them was perceived to be by by white men. And we're not going to worry about any of the interpersonal violence or interracial violence and things like that because that's not important and we can't profit from that, right? That's like, I mean, that's how the fine print has to read based on their actions. And I tried to have this discussion with somebody who's very pro Black Lives Matter. And I was like, well, you know, we just had this crazy shooting and we're going to see them show up here. But I know it's for the police. I'm like, well, why are they called that? You know, and that is the power of words. You you get people who logically will you can get them to follow it. Like, okay, they're not showing up when there are other crimes. Well, when there's violence in Black communities at the hands of other Black people, and we can get them to logically take that step. But then when I get them to go, so we can agree that it's not that Black lives matter. It's that when there's a situation we can spin, I won't even say spin, that's my words, but they only matter when the people who are taking them are not Black. And you can like see the breakdown because either they admit that and I'm right, or it's in denial and the concept is wrong. Like in general, just not right. One of they can't give. And so they just go back and now we're talking more about people who can't. You know.
Yeah. The other situation, and I always get so nervous that I misspeak on the exact details. So this is a general recollection of it. But the kid who his mom like drove him across state lines, he had a gun. He was at one of the protests. He shot and killed 2 people. I think it was the Kennesaw.
Ritenhouse, Kyle Ritenhouse. Yeah.
So I remember when like the trial happened. I believe he shot 2 white people.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? No.
And people on Twitter were like, whoa, hold on. That's not what we were told.
And this is something, because I followed this like probably as closely as you'll ever get me following mainstream news. It doesn't affect me. Because I was curious because I didn't know things and I wanted to see like what's the deal? Are we going to see? Because here's the thing, I'm not. One way we got to make sure justice is distributed well and be aware of that because
it's important for people who do wrong things to be punished.
Right. Because if he was out there just randomly shooting Black people, right, that's a big deal if they let him off. But it's also a big deal if he's like not. We got to figure out what it is. And so when you go and learn the details of the case and the background of him, you know, this is a guy who like had been talking about Black Lives Matter himself as a white kid. And going out there, as I remember, he was either donating or contributing or cleaning up. But he did shoot, you know, white guys, and so that's a great spin because you know what did Mark Twain say, man? A lie is halfway around the world before the truth gets his shoes on. And that was before the internet. So now you got people going up into the trial who really believe that. And I didn't dig too deeply into it, but then when I found out, I was like, okay, let me follow this a little more closely because there's a lot to learn here. And then you stay the whole state lines thing, you know, I believe that was either his grandmother or father's neighborhood. It wasn't like he was just randomly on a bus and was like, I'm going to go hunting. Like, nah.
That was the one time where I seems like similar to you. And then like, I don't really pay that much attention to like the national news about a lot of this stuff. And frankly, the most interest that I have in, you know, kind of what I'd consider more local or regional things that blow up to the national level is like, oh, there's a police chase. Like it's a cool video, right? Yeah. Which like, you know, good or bad, whatever, that's human nature. Like there's some crazy thing that ends up being entertainment, unfortunately for some portion of the population. But this one, I don't know if it was because it was being pushed so hard by the national media or whatever, but like I felt like I kind of popped my head up and I was like, oh, that's not exactly what my assumptions were, what I had thought were the facts or whatever. And then it was kind of one of these things where like I couldn't wait to like pull my head back down and just like, I don't want to be paying attention. I'm not happy when I'm reading that stuff every day in terms of like the national news.
It really messes with you.
Yeah, and it was just one of these situations where I remember saying to myself like, for me, somebody who's on the internet a lot, and like, I don't know, like generally aware maybe of like the national news stories. I don't pay a lot of attention to them, but like I see what's trending on Twitter, you know, all this stuff. If I was that surprised, I didn't even want to go watch. What was Fox News saying and MSNBC? Because again, it's just like the mainstream Twitter conversation, you could see the shock and like the outrage is probably too extreme of a word, but just like people being like, whoa, there's more here that maybe we don't understand.
Right.
That you could imagine the extremes of the mainstream media, just pulling every detail, spinning it, doing all this stuff. And you're just like, it's just like we're all gonna die one day. I don't want to spend. I don't want to spend my time trying to figure out.
That's how I feel. You know,
some of this.
People always ask me.
Today's episode is brought to you by FTX US. They're a safe, regulated way to buy Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. They've got very cheap fees, sometimes as much as 85% cheaper than their competitors. There's also no minimum fees, there's no withdrawal fees, or any other hidden fees. Ultimately, FTX US is trying to make it dead simple for you to buy Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. They also now have digital stock trading as well, with no transaction fees and no payment for order flow. All you have to do is go download the FTX app today from the App Store and use code POMP, and you'll get some money back every single time you trade $10 or more. Again, go download the FTX app today, use code POMP, and every time you trade $10 or more, they'll go ahead and they'll give you some crypto back. The more you trade, the more you earn. Download the FTX app today.
Well, not always. They don't always ask me, but it comes up a lot because I'm fairly vocal about it, about my disinterest in politics and current events. And I know that seems weird because we've just spent the last 20 to 30 minutes discussing these things, but it's only because you can't really, like, it's very hard to be on the internet to the level we are and not be at least aware of things. And some things you will dig deeper into because they're just for whatever reason, whether it's because the details seem interesting or they just won't go away. That's really the big one. It just won't go away. But for the most part, like I try to maintain, I call it willful ignorance and active disinterest in a lot of the stuff that is on the politics and current media, because at the end of the day, I figure like this. But let's forget the Stoic stance. I really believe in that, which I'm going to die one day. I would rather enjoy it. If something's a real big deal, and it's going to affect my life, I'm going to find out. Let's say I didn't know anything about Real ID and I just went on my way. I'm going to find out that my ID is wrong and I'm going to have to do something about that. But because I travel, I'm going to hear about it anyway, And I think about the number of things that have happened in politics that bug me or that affect me, not bug me, that affect me. And I'm like, I can't think of much. And when they do, thank goodness I've structured my life in such a way. If something really bothers me, like it's a really big deal, I'm just going to leave the country or move to another state.
And a lot of people did that over the last 2 years.
Right.
They moved states.
Not move states and move countries. I just seen an article is trending about how Mexico people are complaining in Mexico City how there's too many white people in Mexico City and like go back to America, and they're like go back. And it's funny, I'm seeing that from Mexico. My wife's Portuguese. We're here, record numbers of Americans in Portugal now. I mean, it's still a small percentage, but there's a lot of people leaving. But that's where my stance is. I create this agency around my life so that I don't have to worry about this stuff. And I think outside of people who make a living by knowing the game, like my brother-in-law, he's a wealth planner and he makes a lot of his decisions on where to put money at based on what he believes the economy will do, and he comes to those conclusions from years of experience and watching the news. Yeah, he probably should watch the news. I don't do any of that, so I don't pay attention to it. And if it's a big deal, I'm going to find out. My life is going to get a real hard reminder quickly. But
there's one other thing that started to happen that I noticed, and it always scares me when I notice I got a new reaction to things I see. But it hit home this morning, actually. I was on Twitter and I saw a account which, in the gray area, so, something you got to double check, see what's getting posted. But they retweeted an account that I'd never seen before. And it was a video. And it said, I thought Ukraine was being invaded or something to that effect. And it was allegedly a video of a party in Kiev of a bunch of what looked like 20-something-year-olds partying their faces off, drinking. No different than if on Friday night you went out in Miami and somebody took a video, right? And it looked like people playing beer pong, kind of like a college party, right? And there was like 2 or 3 levels, and it looked like maybe 50, 100 people there. Not what we would expect, right? Because on the same day, the same morning I see that, the president of Ukraine is ringing the stock market bell and basically pitching on CNBC the investment in Ukraine. And I just thought to myself, my first reaction was not good or bad. It was, is this video real?
Which, man.
I was like, man, these people really look Ukrainian. Oh, like, you know, you start thinking to yourself, like, like, what time could this video have been posted? Like, all of a sudden, you like, now we're in this weird world on the internet of like, I don't even know if that video is really
and so
that
you
video.
Can't even put the energy right. Yeah, I just, I'm slightly at a loss for words only because I have this exact reaction to everything. In fact, you ever see The Matrix? And the first time Neo meets Morpheus, or not the first time, but it's early in their meetings, he goes, "You have the look of a man who accepts everything he sees because he's expecting to wake up." Funnily enough, that's not too far from the truth, right? Yes. And I'm like, that's how I feel about a lot of stuff I see, because you can't, you don't know. You don't know anymore. And because so much come out where the angle is changed and leaving out something vital, or it's outright fabricated, or it's an old photo used to represent something new. You just got to look at everything with a grain of salt and go, okay, look, if I want, like, if you know how they say, if you want to find something to be angry about, if you want to be angry, you'll find something to be angry about. It's a perfect example. You don't know if half this stuff is real, half the stuff that comes out is fake. It's so crazy. I'm aware of all the news and all the numbers around inflation. And even I have to go sometimes. I'm at the grocery store and I'm looking at the price and go, is it really that bad? Like, because I'm looking at the meat and the price, and I know what I pay, because, you know, and I'm just like, is it really that bad? Or is it really happening? And then I think about 1984, and I think that's a book everyone should read. It's fiction, so. All right.
I have read 1984.
Right. But that when they explain that they're not really at war, and they break down the way things really work, because we just, you know, we tell everyone they are, and everyone proceeds if it is like that. Because when things are that way, you don't have to innovate, you don't have to create, you know. It's not good. People think you're at war, they just listen and follow, and it gives everyone the power to create, not everyone the power, the government to enact laws, and we don't have to worry about innovation or educating our citizens. I think about that a lot sometimes, like that. Like you could, in fact, if you don't want to read, anyone listening, if you don't want to like read 1984, just get to that part where I can't remember the character's name, but he's explaining how everything really works when he gets, I think he finds a book or something that explains how the war and all that is manufactured. And then you start looking around, you go, okay, this is a little too close to home. I'm going to step back, because it's really designed. I believe this in my heart of hearts, because it makes sense. Following the money, this makes sense. Forget the conspiracy angle. It makes sense that you being enraged is good for the network's pocket, because the networks work on a CPM model, as far as I understand it, especially on the internet, where you don't even got to buy anything. You just got to keep reading. You just got to be on the site. And so they get paid. You go on, and you're going to go because you're angry and you got to find out more information. And so they figured it out. Let's just put the most negative, extreme, polaristic stance on something, almost to the point of it not being accurate. Like when you read what the article's about versus what the headline says. But it's okay, because they got you to click through and read, so there's more money. Everyone goes home happy when you're angry and polarized.
Do you remember during 2020, CNN had I called it the death scoreboard? You remember they had that on there? They literally had a scoreboard.
They just kept at the bottom of the screen. And it was at the bottom on the right. On the big right. Where it showed how many people were.
And the reason why I know is at the time I was living in New York, and in the building, there was a TV in the elevator. And they never had anything else on. Like, I requested like 100 times. I was like, yo, can you please get this? Because it was depressing. Right? It was like, man, like, this is like not what I want to do when I get in the elevator, is look at this thing. And it was there every day. And I remember being like, holy shit. Like that is, in terms of getting people enraged and holding attention, doing all this stuff, that single thing, that's the most innovative thing they've ever done. You couldn't ask for a better piece of reporting than this negative scoreboard. On a very related note, have you ever seen Anchorman 2? They're both funny movies, but Anchorman 2 is really underappreciated because it's a brilliant piece of social commentary on how the news spins things to keep you engaged. And when I first seen it, at this point, man, it might be, I don't know, I feel like it was definitely over 10 years ago, probably like 15 at this point, Anchorman 2. I remember I thought that when I seen it. This is before I got really into social media and seen anything. And I was like, wow, they really summed it up. If you can make people, the basic premise is news by itself is boring and doesn't keep people engaged. And so we don't lose, we don't make money, and we're going to be off the network. So let's figure out how to make money. Oh, this is the kind of stuff we got to cover. Let's cover that, and that saves the network. When you see that, you go, wow, this is nuts. And it's funny, and so that's probably why people missed the main point. But that's what I took away from it all those years, and I see it in place now. I see how it's working now, and that scoreboard, great idea. That was a great idea. Going back to the race conversation, let's not report on the shootings when the perpetrator is white, or when the victim is white, or the police officers are black. We don't want to report on those. That's not good news. All right? It is good news when a white guy shoots a black dude. Like that video, that story about them cops beating the crap out of. There's so many. I don't even know which one, right? It makes news. It pops up because it's a violent video. Swept away, goes away. The internet, I actually think, has a much better memory now than
that's
than
true.
The news does, right? Because they will they'll pop this stuff up, and also I think a lot of people on the internet now have moved from fact to entertainment. So I see a lot of videos on the internet, and if you're new to the internet, whatever that would mean, you'd be trying to figure out, is that really where it's from or whatever. I don't know if you saw it's allegedly a Russian dash cam video where there's two cars driving at night. One kind of pulls in front of the other. The driver hops out in the middle of the highway. He's banging on the driver door. And then four people get out and they're in full blown Halloween costumes, and they beat them up. Right. And they jump back in and they take off. And it's this is the most amazing dash cam, whatever. And I saw it recently, was circulating again, and people are retweeting it. And now I just said to myself, I don't give a fuck where that is. That's just funny. Yeah. Right. Strip away all the kind of chaotic, sensitivities that everyone's trying to get everyone enraged or whatever. And it's by the way, the video's probably fake. It's probably staged. If you look at it through the lens of that's a YouTube stunt, all of a sudden now people are yo, look at this funny ass video.
And people, man, they're really coordinating these YouTube stunts. I only know that because I just shared this video. Absolutely hilarious, but it blurs the line. Well, you're from New York. You've seen the way these homeless people just kind of set up shop on a car and they just stroll back and forth. So the video is of a homeless guy walking through a subway. He's got no shirt on, no shoes. So pretty much everyone's just kind of ignoring him like you would in New York when you see nothing new. And then he stops, looks at a woman with her food, and then just grabs it and just runs off. And now no one knows it's a stunt but the guy who's recording and the guy who is running off with the food. But that's why it looks so real.
Oh, he faked it.
Yeah. Well, did he fake it? Well, what's a fake? Well, that would mean that everyone was in on it. Yeah. I think the only person that was in on it was the guy filming it and the guy who was. But so is he really in on it? No, he's being an asshole and filming it is a better look at it. But what does that do to our perception? The way I shared it, I was just being funny. Oh man, these homeless people aren't just sitting around waiting for you to toss some change. They're taking it now, right? If I'm looking at that video, I'm thinking, oh man, that is crazy that a God would do that. It must be real. Never mind the fact that like someone just happened to be filming somebody, but it is kind of funny and weird. I've done that, take pictures of crazy shit I see or videos, and the guy just happens to run off and with the food, but it blurs this line where everyone around you doesn't know it's a joke. You know it's a joke, but the only part of it that makes it a joke is that he's not actually a homeless dude, and it's set up for entertainment. It's kind of like it's like Candid Camera. Remember that shit? Same idea.
I always think you couldn't do some of these things that they used to get away with. You couldn't do them today.
Absolutely not.
There's some of those like prank shows and stuff that they could absolutely get away because they wouldn't get punched in the face or whatever. Like society's kind of gotten softer and people would just be offended or whatever. And then there's some of those shows like Punked or whatever. Like now I think people would just go to blows.
It's just bad. You know, like there's a whole video series somebody sent me where I guess it's in New York, but he's behind bulletproof glass, which is important here. It says Chicago, New York. It's one of those big cities, and the guys come in, and he goes and pays for his stuff. It's a dude behind the counter. It's a dude paying, and the dude goes, "All right, thanks, Daddy. You have a good night." And he said, "Yo, what you call me?" He was like, "I just called you Daddy, man. What's up?" He was like, what do you mean? That's what you can call us, just like dudes like that. Like, no, don't call me that. Don't play that way. And he just keeps, and he goes, all right, cool. All right, nice one, sugar lips. And you know, and he's just like, but because the guy can't get behind the camera, he's okay. But you're right. Like if he could, you know, because some of the dudes were like, oh, you lucky you back behind that glass. Yeah. Like
you seen where they do the NBA players? They go up to the NBA players, and like the most recent one. They had, what's the kid that was in Philadelphia and he got traded to the Brooklyn, Ben Simmons. And I think it was Ben Simmons. And they went up to him and they're like, what's up, Russell Westbrook? And they like go up to the players and they pretend that they don't know who they are or like they think they're somebody else. And of course, you're an NBA player, man, get the fuck out of here, right? And so they chased the dude out of a store. Because they realized immediately it's like now become a thing where it's like, you're trying to disrespect me.
Now it's like, get out. Yeah, it's just
and now they got security, world, man. They got all this. The other thing that I think a lot about is sometimes something happens in life and you don't know if it's like, if they're trying to not punk you, but like you see stuff happen and you're just like, yo, is that real? And you start kind of looking around and in today's society, you're kind of just like, is there a camera somewhere? Is there something happening or whatever? And I don't think that that's necessarily the best thing, you know, over the long run. If everyone is always just thinking about, you know, like how do you capture footage? Like if life became basically a TV set, that don't seem like a good path to go down.
You know, I'm in the creator space on I guess the internet, Twitter, social media, YouTube, and one of the things I've observed. And I comment on it pretty regularly, much to the dismay of many of my fellow creators. But I go, look, man, I'm 37, and I was putting together my life because of my age. I was putting together my life as if there wasn't gonna be no cameras around. You know, I didn't start boxing so I could make videos of it, for example. I certainly didn't go back to school so I could talk about it on the internet and study physics. Like, no, it's like hard things you do to form my life that, like, look, let's be real here. I could probably, with what I understand about internet making money now, I could probably never do anything worthwhile again and just make a living for the rest of my life on the derivatives and lessons from that. But I never do that because I don't think that way. You see, though, especially with the guys under 30, because it's a different generation. And that sounds weird, but under 30, what would that make you? You'd be born in 93, 92?
Something like that, yeah.
So yeah, 92. Afterwards, so means you're going to come up, and at the very least, in your high school days, that's when social media is going to start popping off. By the time you reach your 20s, your early 20s, you're like, why would I ever go do something hard and challenging and push myself? I'm going to try this internet thing. I'm going to try to make this money thing. So you got a whole generation of guys who have figured out how to make money online, talking about and doing a lot of the same things that everyone else was, because they all sound the same. Slightly different flavor, but all talking about the same thing, because there are certain topics that are just more engaging. But if you don't have a life to go behind, like I can talk about And platitude when I say it, because you can look me up. I went through it, right? It's real life. But if I can't, if you like some kid from a middle class suburb family, you start talking about discipline habits and pulling yourself up and fixing your life, it comes off. You can get away with it in one platform and another or whatever. But the whole idea, the whole point is that you really gain perspective and life experience and real. These things start to mean something when you have to use them. Mm-hmm. It's like why would a kid join the army now? That's another discussion, right? But why would he go enlist in the armed services or take up a combat sport or just thinking of things I've done. Armed service, take up a combat sport, to learn a very difficult subject, pick up a language or two, right? Learn an instrument. There are all these things, but they take time and they're hard and the failure is there and you're not going to face it. And on top of that, it's not good instant screen time. It's not a good investment, right? It's not, you can't capture it. Everyone wants to be the man, because I know a lot of guys personally, and I see some of the things they post, and I'm like, man, I know what you really doing and making. That's kind of, it's a little misleading. I'm not going to say, because it ain't my thing. You're not really selling money, so I make it, but I look and I go, that's really misleading
because they're position themselves that they make more than they actually do.
Well, because you can, one of the cool things is what I like about travel, and it's like this about anything, but travel is just the first thing that comes to mind, is that if you don't know, you assume it is a very expensive thing to do. It is high, but once you know, you go, it's not really. It is what it is, but it's a good selling point.
If you're good at the internet, you can find how to get a lot of places in the world pretty cheap.
If you're good at the internet, you can get a Lambo for $2. Have you heard about these guys? They're renting the Lambos to make it look like a life. You can really make your life look a certain way. But when I sit down in front of you and I talk and I realize you don't have any type of skill, you don't have any type of experience, you don't know or do anything. Talk to a lot of marketer guys. I'm really big on the relationships in your life. I'm not saying you got to have a bunch, but I think one of the telltale signs of somebody who has gone through a life is that they have long-term friends. I'm not interested in the guy who really took that advice to heart. Get rid of your old friends when you level up. No, because there should be some people in your life that they bring something more to the table than or other than, advice and ideas on how to hustle. I get good, solid relationships, all these things, right? Where are these things to make a life? We have really become about, and I'm not even going to say we, man, because I'm not in that generation. I am very much a damn near an elder millennial at this point. It has become really cool to have the sizzle without the steak. Mm-hmm. If that, to put it in real easy terms, real easy. Let's look the part. We don't really want to be the part. But I don't think they're trying to do that. They don't even know what the part is to be.
This is in business, specifically in the tech industry, in the startup world. I used to call it a blog post founder versus a real founder. And what I mean by that is you could be a founder who went and read a bunch of blog posts and you learned all the things that you're supposed to say. And so to the untrained eye, you could trick a lot of people. You could raise some money. You could do this, whatever. But to the trained eye, it takes 2 questions and it's just bam, and you can break it down. Now the benefit, and this is kind of a larger story of all of society, part of the positive of that story is that information that used to be behind closed doors in the good old boys network, all this stuff is now available on the internet because there's somebody who reads it who's a real entrepreneur, right? And will go and implement it. And now they know how to work with their board, or they know how to put together a fundraising deck, or there's a database of investors to reach out to, or, whatever. But with positives comes negatives. And there's a lot of people who now can kind of fake it better because they read the blog post and they think they know what they're supposed to say, whatever. That's business, and usually it's in an environment where they're asking somebody for money.
But it's the same idea.
Yes. Is okay, cool. Now take it to the successful people. And one of the things I tell all the young kids who I see doing some of this stuff is I always tell them, I say, hey, man, you ever seen a picture of Elon Musk on his jet?
Right. Like,
no. And by the way, the picture you saw of him on a yacht, that's somebody else's yacht, and he didn't want the picture taken. Right?
One of the things that I really pride myself on, man, is when you see, because I use IG like everyone else, but I used to promote my writing really like heavily. But I do like to show that I'm a real person and I exist. So I put pictures of my life and stuff. But it's always like, it's me with some friends, with my girl, or with the, what's the last picture? I posted I was standing in the water making a silly pose on the beach, man. Like, just showing like. But because I think after a certain point, like when you learn the negatives that come with a lot of that. In fact, I would say like I'm really big on posting stuff that show me living life. And actually living life. We were in Budapest for this is one of the coolest things about the internet. I'm sure you get this right. So we were in Budapest for a week and then took a river cruise down the Danube. We stopped in Bratislava, Vienna, Linz, and one of the places, Munich. Right, and when we were in Budapest, she was there though because of what my wife does. She's involved in travel and scheduling stuff and helping people take these amazing trips places. And so she was there for a river cruise conference. So I was like, I'm gonna go. But that week she was busy. So what I did, I just let people know I was and every day there was somebody else to hang out and show me stuff. And so I got like real tours and real just a different view and experience. And I took pictures with everybody because I wanted to show like this is what's really rich about life, being able to like touch down and have real conversations with people I talk to now still. I'm not in Budapest. And so that's really trained in a gym and worked out. That was hard because I'm not trained like a fighter anymore. Yeah. But that's the value. And that was like one of my favorite pictures to post is all these people that I got to meet and run into. You don't see me, sitting in a picture of me in my first class or something like that, or with the Lambos or posing with my jewelry or my watch. No, it's the people. But if I don't show, that's what they think. If I don't show that stuff, people ain't gonna buy from me or deal with me. And I get it. There's like this whole image to project. But why would you wanna? I wonder what the motivation is to do it. I guess
it brings it back to street versus boardroom.
Mm-hmm.
Is there's people who their entire life they're trying to project the boardroom, and then when they get there, I think a lot of people realize like, nah, man, you'll always want to try to get back to the street mentality, to the this approach of those people are trapped. I think about it all. I'll tell you another great filter I have. My wife and I talk about it a lot. I don't think this will have any identifying information. I don't know the person's name, so that helps. We were in Austin, Texas 2 years ago, kind of end of 2020. And we went out to eat. And we were somewhere, I don't know, 6th Street or whatever. Kind of where if you were a tourist, this is where you would go. But it was kind of a nicer place. And guy walked in, and I have a problem where I pretty much only just wear T-shirts. So, so every once in a while you catch me maybe in like a black collar shirt. That's a big dress up for me. But I was sitting there and just regular clothes or whatever. My wife, same thing. And this guy walks in and he had a button down, like a dress shirt, right? Some jeans and nice shoes. And he was like, cool. Goes over and there's like an outdoor patio. And this guy's a regular. He knows every staff person, like all this stuff. And people are showing up and he's pointing, he's doing this, he's ordering drinks. He's got the whole thing going. And for whatever reason, I just turned to my wife and I said, I bet you $100 that dude's a medical device salesman. Right? And she was like, what do you mean? And I said, he's got just enough money where he could ball in the local bar, but he ain't got a yacht, a jet, a Ferrari, like whatever, right? Yeah. And by the way, I always go back to like, if he's happy, amazing, congratulations, right. You fucking crushed life. But I always ask myself, like, did he one day say, I'm going to go and I'm going to become successful, whatever the job actually was, right? And I want to have enough money to go to the local bar and like basically, ball out.
Yeah.
Probably not, right? And so like it was less about this one individual as much as it was just like there's a whole lifestyle that I think people go and they do, and they're almost like fooling themselves a little bit. But it does go back to the fact of like, if they're truly happy, you got to just high five them, celebrate, and like, hey, you killed life. I think the reason why people always point out these situations is because a lot of those people aren't actually happy.
And not only, I think happiness is hard too, because there'll be moments where you're good and moments where you're not, whatever, right? But ultimately, I think I don't know why I don't like the word happiness to describe it, but I do wonder if fulfilled. That's the word I want.
Yeah, it's a great word.
Fulfilled, kind of purposeful. Because I got a good friend and he described it like this. There's a lot of guys that figured out how to make money, and they figured it out by positioning themselves as opposed to generating value, and just really getting in the right place where the money changes hands, and you take a cut, however that looks, whether it be an affiliate cut or a founder's fee or something like that, whatever, right? You just get in the right place, the right plumb, or moving somebody else's product. And we associate money with value, but personal value. So it gets mixed up. They think have this and that. And there's a lot of skeezy people with money, and there's a lot of cool people who are broke. And it's not. This goes back to what I was saying about, why would you drop your friends, right? Now, you drop somebody as a problem for various reasons, but if you cut out hanging out with somebody, it's because they're happy doing something. It might not be a financially lucrative move, but they're content. They're fulfilled. They're still your solid homie. You guys still are able to connect, and they're a good person, right? But if it ain't about that image, that money that you can project, what are you doing? Nah. And that's where we got a weird relationship with money in this society. Because I think a lot about the stat 75,000 and above to be happy. They see you make $75,000, and any more than that doesn't add to happiness. I think, we add inflation to that. It's probably somewhere around 90. But like, the point is, there's a place you reach where everything after that is kind of right. Does it make you feel more fulfilled? And so you start going, okay, well, how do I get there? That's what makes a difference. And a lot of people just want the money. They don't consider that it's path dependent. You look, because you can go selling dope. Okay, you don't want to do something illegal. You could probably do 18 to 20-hour shifts every other day, doing day work. Combine that with some Uber, you get that money there, right?
You want to know one of the number one jobs in America make $100K?
What's that?
Drive a truck for Walmart.
Yep. Oh,
starting pay $100K.
Yep.
Right. If I forget the stat, maybe VP at Walmart, $1 million a year. You ain't even got, no one's got to know your name. You don't even got to have a LinkedIn profile.
Bro, just a
$1
VP.
million a year, and you run some division or whatever. Now, again, like, it takes time to get there. You got to be smart. You got to know what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you just wake up one day and go apply and bam, you're 22 years old, you're the VP at Walmart. But $100K as a truck driver?
And look, exactly. I actually made that suggestion to a buddy of mine who was trying to make the money. I was like, look, man, if it's just about money, just go be a truck driver. Like, now, if you want to, like, if there are other things that are important, yeah. But when you make it about money, then you miss out on. I don't
see a lot of truck drivers posting on Instagram saying 6 figures by 26.
Right. But you got your truck drivers. I know a guy in the a Boilermaker. I mean, he's doing like $55,000, $50 to $55 an hour, depending on the job, which works out to be about $100K a year, a little less. But like, there are so many ways to get to this land of plenty. And then, you get there and you go, all right, well, do I like how I got there? Is it all correct up to me? What do I need? Lifestyle creep is a real MFer, right? All of this, you go, and you figure out what matters to you. And that's what I think this all comes back to, is that people have let people have let social media, let other people determine what's important to them. So they think I have to make this life on this screen, capture, remove almost all authenticity, create a somewhat fraudulent image. Well, fraud might be too strong a word. Misleading is probably better. Somewhat misleading image to keep the money train going. And it's not that much money because, well, I don't have much to show for my life outside of this. Like if you removed it, I think about this imaginary scenario. Like if there was say tomorrow, the power grid shut down and we got to start over from scratch. What am I going to do? Well, I'm probably either going to work on something mechanical or turn into a soldier. That's going to be one of them. Be out there foraging, hunting, figuring things out, and defending the new settlement with skill. But to have that skill, you got to go do things and figure these things out. It's kind of I'm kind of rambling, but
no, it's a mentality.
Yeah,
and I think that's probably the biggest thing of a lot of the people who maybe seem a little lost or they're trying to project an image of somewhere where they're not yet. Doesn't mean that they can't get there or whatever. But I do think a lot about, could you take that person, drop them off somewhere? How long does it take to come back? Yeah.
Like, in fact, what's funny, man, was just having this conversation with the wife. I was like, yo, I'm really happy with the life I've built and the connections and everything like that. Because I was talking about, it's not about who you know. I mean, it's not about what you know. The older I get, the more I learn, it really seems to be about who you know. At least that helps a lot more than what you know. But I was like, I think about this. Like, if I was wiped out tomorrow, how long would it take to recover? I still have all my knowledge and all my skills. And I'm really happy that I'm not going to immediately bounce back, but it shouldn't take more than a year given what I know and how I know how to interact with people and reach out with the internet or not and the skill I have. I think that's a worthwhile kind of metric to stand at. Like if you were wiped out, like all your social media, everything was gone, right? I was just regular old Ed Latimore. And I showed up. All I have are my skills and my knowledge. I don't even have the cool boxing record I put together. I got, how would I come back? Okay, well, I know enough how to do one thing, or a few things, and it would make it.
That to me is true for very many people in the sense of if they had to start over from scratch, they probably would end up being further along over the long run. Because they get it.
Well, I don't have to bump into as many walls, that's for sure. A lot of walls, man.
Yeah, that's the game.
Just figure it out over and over time. One of my favorite jobs I had, in fact, it was my favorite one. I did it longer than I had to. I was a tutor for high school. High schoolers, physics and mathematics. I took on some English kid once, and I was like, never again. And I like reading, but I don't like the way that school makes you read and what you have to know and what the work is. But I can teach you how to gain the right answer, your thought process through physics, chemistry, and math. And I think about that a lot because, now granted, because the people with that skill set, it's not a big overlap between who has enough time to teach it and who knows enough. Most people with that skill set have jobs using them. And so I was able to charge a premium, but the impact I have is that I still have many of the kids I worked with when they're not adults now, they're in their 20, 21, they still reach out. I just had coffee with the other one today and she was telling me about, her dad was like, ask him about XYZ and stuff like that. And because it was working in the world, man. It was a physical, it was to be there and but connect with humans. And that means a lot to me. It was my favorite. Second favorite job, most entertaining one after that, though, definitely would have been when I worked at the homeless shelter. You get a lot of stories, man. but that's neither here nor there. You just figure these things out and have a good time. I think this should almost be a component where you got to do some physical work before you can talk about Talk about doing stuff online.
Yeah, that's very true. Where can we send people if they want to buy the books or read any of your writing or get more of these ideas? Because I think a lot of people will hear this and they'll say, "Hey, wait a minute, this guy's got some stuff figured out. He's still pretty open about figuring out more things in his life, and he's been able to become self-sufficient on the internet, which a lot of folks I think are trying to figure out." So where can we send them to learn more from?
So I am Ed Latimore everywhere on the internet. EdLatimore.com is my website. Ed Latimore's my Twitter. Ed Latimore's my Instagram. Ed Latimore's my Facebook and LinkedIn. So yeah,
there's no more Ed Latimores. You're the only one.
Yeah, you know what's funny, man? I usually say when people ask that, I go, look, if somebody's born after the name Ed Latimore, I feel bad for him. I'm not gonna name my son that, man, because if he ever wants to go on the internet, he's gonna have to beat the SEO machine I've built behind the name.
That's amazing.
Ed Latimore. So yeah, that's how you find me, man. I'm everywhere under that name.
All right, EdLatimore.com and then Ed Latimore on all the social
medias, yeah.
I really enjoyed today.
Hey, man, I enjoyed it too. It was a great conversation. Very. I made some insights that I did not necessarily connect before. Now I got to dig deeper. Like this is what I do. Like when I have an idea and it's a flash and I let it be a flash for a minute. And if I keep thinking about it, I'm like, okay, I have to like sit down. That's why I write. One of the reasons why I write, because it makes me smarter. Mm-hmm. Because if I describe like right now that this thought, the link between the immune system and reading, right? It's not really connected at all. But now it's a thought, and I'm thinking about all the ways it connects. And they're like little spinning magnetic poles. Mm-hmm. And what I'll do when I write is like running a magnet over a piece of steel, and they all point in the same direction. And now that piece of steel has force like it's a magnet and can move things itself. And that's how I look at my thoughts when I write, is that I'm putting them all in the same direction.
Writing is for clear thinking.
Absolutely.
Clear thinking makes you a better writer.
One of my favorite sayings, I don't write because I'm smart. I'm smart because I write.
That's very, very true. That's a great place to end, my friend. I appreciate it very much, and I hope everyone enjoyed this.
Hey, thank you.